The story begins on the mysterious continent of Gaia, from which monsters began to disappear several years ago. At first, the wizards began to wonder what was the reason for their sudden disappearance. But after conducting various investigations, it turned out that this was not the case. All the disappeared monsters moved to another dimension, and of course, many wizards longed for this. No one understood why this phenomenon, known as dimensional shifting, happened to the monsters, but it also helped the wizards in their research. One of the wizards finally managed to create a magic circle, thereby stretching his hands to the ceiling. For him, it was a great success to be able to use the dungeon called the Great Labyrinth. After all, if you use the magical power of this place, then crossing dimensions will not be difficult at all. However, in the labyrinth, the airflow and temperature were completely different than in other places, but things weren't quite like that. The moment the wizard moved to the labyrinth's location, the dungeon crossed dimensions. And at that moment, one young man from the ordinary world suddenly saw something strange in front of him. A portal leading to another dimension. This truly surprised the guy, because he had never encountered such a phenomenon before. The young man was Kang Jin-hyuk, a D-rank hunter who was currently working in water delivery. The job was certainly not easy, but nevertheless, thanks to the fact that Jin-hyuk was a hunter, he had some skills. For example, he could tolerate heat and cold well. And the reason why Jin-hyuk was forced to work part-time in a place like this right now was because he had no money. And because of the guild monopoly, he couldn't find a place for himself. The thing is, a month ago, a certain psycho killer went completely crazy, pursuing the idea of catching and killing hunters from the guild, which is why people began to take out their anger on someone else because they could not catch the killer. Suddenly, as Jin-hyuk was discussing the guild situation with his coworker, a loud sound like a scream was heard. Jin-hyuk thought it was probably a cry for help, so he immediately got out of the car to see what had happened. And his guesses, unfortunately, were correct. It really was a cry for help. Suddenly, monsters attacked a crowd of people. However, Jin-hyuk remained calm, considering this a great chance to prove himself. He then took out a bat from his inventory in order to kill all the monsters and eliminate the threat. His colleague also wanted to help him, saying that he had been training a lot lately. But Jin-hyuk replied that it was unlikely to help him since the monster had a special wavelength around it, making them invulnerable to attacks from ordinary people and even ordinary weapons. Jin-hyuk noted that the only ones who can challenge the wave are hunters like him, who are given the appropriate characteristics. For the young man, fighting monsters, oddly enough, was also an excellent way to earn money, because even if he caught the smallest ones, he wouldn't have to worry about money for a whole year. However, not everything was as simple as he thought, and hunters stronger than him arrived at the sight of the monster's appearance. At that moment, Jin-hyuk's attempt to earn more money was doomed to failure. Meanwhile, these were not just hunters, but the Titan Guild, responsible for this zone, and along with the rest of the guild members, there was also the deputy leader, An Do-yun. Jin-hyuk claimed that he was the first to arrive here, which meant that all these monsters were his prey. But Do-yun replied that this was not true, because this was their zone. Do-yun pointed out that it was he, not Jin-hyuk, who arrived here first, since the law does not state that the first person is the owner. And besides, the association never established such a rule. Jin-hyuk didn't like this outcome and the fact that they were trying to steal his money right from under his nose, so he tried to fight back against Do-yun. But be that as it may, the difference in strength between them was too great, and defeating the young man was no problem for Do-yun. Jin-hyuk was angry at the tyranny of the big guilds, but all he could do was take on another part-time job to scrape together some money since he was a powerless D-rank hunter. After his part-time job, the young man had many thoughts. He had the feeling that he wanted that psycho killer to kill everyone from the Titan Guild. But what struck him most was his own weakness. These thoughts did not give him peace, and he did not know what he should do next. And at that moment, he heard a strange sound. Suddenly, a strange portal appeared in front of him, and when Jin-hyuk looked into it, he felt as if someone was there, and his senses were right. In this strange and sudden portal, the young man saw goblins. But what was most interesting was that the monsters themselves did not see him, which surprised Jin-hyuk even more. After that, he decided to put his hand into the portal and did not feel any resistance or side effects. Jin-hyuk was pleasantly surprised by this because right now he had a dungeon in his attic. Then he began to think that if his guesses were correct, this was clearly a dungeon that had previously existed only as a concept. But the problem was that it was in his room. The young man thought about reporting the incident to the association, since the possibility of the dungeon's existence had always been discussed, but had never been confirmed. And if he reported it to the association, they would conduct an investigation on the spot, and Jin-hyuk was sure that he would be kicked out of his own home. Therefore, the young man decided to keep the appearance of the dungeon in his house a secret and go and explore it himself. With his abilities, he could only defeat 2 or 3 goblins, and if more monsters attacked him, he would surely die. However, Jin-hyuk gathered his courage and confidence and entered the Goblin Labyrinth dungeon. And before the young man had time to understand what was happening, a goblin was already running towards him, wanting to kill him. However, at that moment, he managed to dodge the blow and jump out of the dungeon, which left the goblin confused, not understanding where he had gone. Jin-hyuk, realizing that the monsters wouldn't be able to get to him anyway, decided that this was an excellent chance to attack them. With his sudden appearance and attack, he easily knocked the goblin off his feet and managed to kill him with a decisive blow. The goblin looked at him with a desperate face, but the young man did not give in to this, because he himself was not in the best position. Having become a hunter, Jin-hyuk went after a monster on his own for the first time. Alone, without sharing his experience with others, and his level, which had remained unchanged for 3 years, finally increased. He realized once again how serious the tyranny of the big guild's control over the hunters was, and in between, he thought about using the goblins' bodies for sale. A goblin's body must be worth at least 3 million won, and Jin-hyuk was curious to see how much he could earn. The next day, Jin-hyuk, full of joy, went to sell the goblin's body in the hope of getting a lot of money for it. Because the monster's body was so badly mangled, its value dropped significantly, and Jin-hyuk could only get a little over 3 million won for it. The young man was happy with everything, because even so, this money was not small for him, but he was required to name the place where he managed to catch the goblin. This was established by law. At that moment, some kind of commotion started, created by the members of the Black Dragon Guild, who came to deal with whoever stole their loot. They first suspected Jin-hyuk, thinking that he was the one who intercepted the monster from their zone. However, the consultant Jin-hyuk had spoken to earlier explained to the boys that it wasn't him. The one who intercepted the monster from their zone was the blonde guy sitting in the depths right now. After which, without further ado, one of the members of the Black Dragon Guild punched the guy right in the face, and the reason was that he was hunting without permission on the territory of another guild, and the only way to avoid such a reprisal was to compensate for the damage. After the brutal beating, the guys wanted to hear an excuse from the guy, why he was wandering around their territory, saying that on days like these, he could end up at the mercy of a psychopathic killer. Then the members of the Black Dragon Guild took the boy away with them, and Jin-hyuk was once again convinced of how cruel the times were now. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk asked the consultant how he knew about this guild. He replied that all guilds of a certain size are connected to this server. Besides, the guy confessed to everything, because if a hunter is caught lying about where he found a monster, his hunting license will be confiscated and he will go to jail, so there is nothing that can be done about it. Jin-hyuk, realizing the situation he might find himself in, changed his mind about selling the goblin's body and went home. Moreover, he could also be dragged away with beatings, so the young man needs to try to avoid being noticed by such guys. And in order to become stronger, Jin-hyuk decided to enter the dungeon again to become stronger. He also took with him the Stone of Return, with the help of which he could return to the right time, regardless of time and place. To do this, the large one had to be left in the place where he needed to return, and the small one had to be taken with him. Besides the Homer Stone he purchased for 1 million won, the young man was also fooled by an advertisement that said he could find out the location of monsters anytime and anywhere. He thus acquired a target acquisition radar, which he purchased for 400,000 won. And in fact, this radar was complete garbage that could only detect a target at a distance of 50 meters in all directions. However, for Jin-hyuk, who is going into the dungeon alone, it is like an extra life. Now the young man had plucked up his courage and was confident that this time, his foray into the dungeon would be more successful. Since goblins weren't strong mobs, fighting them was quite easy, and Jin-hyuk's level rose rapidly. He managed to reach level 9, even though he was only at level 4. As the name Goblin Labyrinth suggested, all the monsters in it were goblins, and although it was monotonous, it was an optimal hunting ground for a low-ranking hunter. Even though the boy's level had increased, his other abilities were still quite low, which was a bit disappointing. And yet, he still has plenty of time ahead of him to properly level up, and in the meantime, make good money on the goblins' bodies. However, Jin-hyuk ran into trouble. There wasn't enough space in his inventory, and there was only one free spot out of 20. Therefore, the young man decided to save the free space for a larger prey, a large goblin, in order to earn the maximum amount of money. He saw a monster approaching him on the radar and decided to set up a small ambush for it, thinking that if he waited for it and suddenly attacked, he would easily defeat it. As soon as he saw the enemy, he immediately swung the bat and hit him straight on the head. And at that moment, he saw his helmet fly off. The young man was very surprised when he saw in front of him not a goblin, but a real living person. and, apologizing to him, asked if everything was okay. However, he was extremely angry with the young man and told him everything he thought about him. But Jin-hyuk did not understand his language. The man, realizing that the young man did not understand him, took a necklace out of his bag and threw it to Jin-hyuk, telling him to put it on. After which, Jin-hyuk already understood the stranger's language and, except for insults directed at him, heard nothing else. The young man continued to apologize to him, saying that he didn't know there was anyone else here, to which the man politely sent him away, saying that it was the first time in 132 years of his dwarven life that he had seen such a young man. Jin-hyuk was pleasantly surprised because dwarves are a race known as blacksmiths, and although he found it hard to believe, the creature in front of him looked exactly as he imagined. Meanwhile, he picked up a very rare item that the dwarf had dropped, to which the dwarf was already ready to beat the young man with his sledgehammer, telling him to immediately give back what he had taken. The dwarf asked the young man to put all the items in his bag, and in the meantime, he turned his attention to the young man's bat. He was surprised when he first saw his weapon, and asked Jin-hyuk where he managed to get it. The young man was very surprised and did not understand what was being discussed, to which the dwarf explained to him that his bat was made of oliharkon, a legendary metal that, according to the ancient Greek god Plato, was used on the continent of Atlantis. It is a very common metal on Earth and the material of Jin-hyuk's only weapon. That's all the young man knew about aluminum, but the dwarf said he couldn't buy it even for hundreds of millions of dollars, saying it was the legendary oliharkon. After that, the dwarf invited them to his workshop to show him how to handle this bat, and at first Jin-hyuk refused, but he offered him rare items he made in exchange. The young man, of course, could not resist such an attractive offer and followed him. Jin-hyuk didn't understand why the dwarf had set up a workshop in such a dungeon, and moreover, lived here completely alone. And meanwhile, he began to wonder what he was doing with his bat. After some time, the dwarf finally came to Jin-hyuk and gave him his bat, and it already looked completely different than before. Jin-hyuk began to doubt whether this was really his bat, but the dwarf explained to him that the red color is a characteristic of the oliharkon, and although it is a soft and light metal when used simply, the more you enchant it, the redder and stronger it becomes. After that, Jin-hyuk decided to test his new weapon, and he also learned about enchanted items that can only be obtained from A-rank monsters and above. And right now, one of the enchanted items was right in his hands, which surprised and delighted him at the same time. At the same time, he was interested to know how something like this could be created artificially, and who this dwarf really was. Despite the fact that the young man had acquired a legendary weapon, he wanted to sell it in order to earn a little extra money. However, there was something special about this beat. No one except Jin-hyuk himself would ever be able to use it. The young man began to look for a new way to make money, and right now he could sell the goblins' bodies, but selling them to the association would not work because of the hunting grounds. So he decided to go to the black market. There is a black market in the hunting industry where bodies are disposed of without asking where they come from, and their contact information is easily obtained. They always give out business cards to low-ranking hunters who need money, which is how Jin-hyuk got a business card from Cho Hyung-il. Hyun-il took him to Lee Chun-chul, an organ dealer who disguised himself as a loan business and now buys and sells the bodies of monsters. Without further ado, Chun-chul asked Jin-hyuk to show him the monsters' bodies so he could examine them. The boys were surprised when they saw 20 goblin bodies, because at first glance, the young man seemed like an ordinary newbie. The monsters were in pretty good condition, so Jin-hyuk asked for 5 million won for each head. But Chun-chul claimed that their heads were badly damaged, so he offered 3 million. Hyun-il noted that no one needed the head because the goblins' faces were so ugly that they weren't even suitable for decoration. Chun-chul already regretted taking Hyun-il with him, and after thinking for a moment, he offered a price of 3.5 million. However, Jin-hyuk said that he would not sell them for less than 4.5 million, and if they did not like the price, they could leave. Suddenly, the rest of Chun-chul's boys came running to them in a hurry and told them that a monster had appeared next to them. Jin-hyuk guessed that the monster was most likely attracted by the goblin's corpse. The young man asked again if there really was a real monster there, and where it was. They answered that it was true, and 2 orcs appeared next to them. Jin-hyuk was confused, wondering if he could fight the orcs right now. He understood that he was in a difficult situation, so he wanted to take the goblins' bodies and leave as quickly as possible, but it was already too late. At that moment, one of the orcs had already found them. Moreover, the monster did not hesitate and immediately attacked Jin-hyuk. The young man thought that this would be the end for him, but what he least expected happened. It was a phenomenon similar to a miracle. His bat itself activated and protected him from the orc's blow. Jin-hyuk was surprised and at the same time glad that he still had a chance to defeat the formidable orc. After this, it was as if a new breath had awakened in him, instilling confidence, and he was no longer afraid to fight the orc, despite the difference in strength. Without any difficulty, the young man managed to defeat one orc, and what's more, for killing him, he raised his level from 24 to 36. However, the monster was not alone. And despite this, Jin Hyuk had plenty of strength to fight. Seeing how Jin Hyuk easily dealt with the orcs, the guys began to wonder if the young man was really low-ranking. As a result, Jin Hyuk seemed to defeat 2 huge orcs at once in an instant, without causing much damage to their bodies, and also increased his level to 48. After this, Jin Hyuk suggested to Chun Chol to discuss selling the bodies of monsters again, including the newly captured orcs. As a result, the young man managed to earn almost 241 million won for 20 goblin bodies and 2 orc carcasses. After such a successful deal, Chun Chol, whom he also saved from the orcs, decided to continue doing business with the young man. Jin Hyuk was sure that Chun Chol was more than just a man selling stolen bodies. And yet, the young man was now experienced enough to catch orcs on his own. However, if he wants to hunt higher-level monsters, it is impossible with his current weapon. So Jin Hyuk decided to succeed in something that would allow him to get some free items. Then he went to the dwarf and brought him some drink. The dwarf was surprised because the material the jar was made of reminded him of Oliharkon. So he asked if this was true and whether there was holy water inside. However, after tasting the so-called beer, the dwarf became furious, saying that it tasted nothing like real beer. Afterwards, Jin Hyuk offered him soju, saying that it tasted a little different. The dwarf liked the taste of soju more, and he could call it alcohol. And in the meantime, he sent the young man in search of mithril. Since Jin Hyuk wanted to get a new weapon for free, he didn't resist and went to look for the necessary metal for the dwarf. After wandering around for a bit, he moved to the second floor of the dungeon, Labyrinth of Dogs and Skulls. Meanwhile, the system offered him to create a warp point on the second floor, and without understanding what it was, Jin Hyuk decided to agree. After which, a gate appeared through which he could pass between the first and second floors. After this, Jin Hyuk went on to search for mithril, fighting monsters, kobolds, along the way. Despite the fact that the kobolds outnumbered him, the young man did not feel any fear of them. After all, the more monsters he kills, the more experience he gets, and the faster he will raise his current level. Having killed a crowd of kobolds, Jin Hyuk increased his level to 74, and was also able to take with him 25 monster bodies, for which he wanted to receive no less than 200 million won. The young man couldn't wait to sell the monsters' bodies and earn a ton of money. But at that moment, he remembered the dwarf's order and set out to search for mithril, after which he climbed into the depths of the dungeon, where those same skeletons were waiting for him. At first glance, the skeletons seemed quite terrifying, and in addition, they had a peculiarity. They could only be killed by destroying the core in their body, and only after the destruction of this very core can the skeleton be considered dead. Meanwhile, there was not 1 or 2 skeletons, but a whole crowd. So Jin Hyuk tried to remain vigilant. But despite their numbers, Jin Hyuk still managed to defeat them, leaving him quite exhausted. The young man also managed to level up to 100 and received the opportunity to change his class, which is determined based on his recent actions. Jin Hyuk was in anticipation of what the system had in store for him. But it only lasted until he realized that the system had assigned him the priest class. After some time, Jin Hyuk finally managed to get hold of the mithril that the dwarf had spoken of. The dwarf was pleasantly surprised that the young man managed to find the precious metal, because he thought that he might die in his search. He also asked the young man if this was all the mithril he had managed to obtain. Jin Hyuk replied that it was, deciding not to tell the dwarf that he had kept some for himself. After this, the dwarf began crafting, asking Jin Hyuk if there was a feature he needed. Jin Hyuk noted that it would be nice to have some kind of protection, and for it to be invisible, to which the dwarf replied that he would do that without any problem. It was quite hot in the dwarf's workshop, so Jin Hyuk decided to go home to get some rest, and slept for a full 6 hours. Meanwhile, the dwarf had already finished making new armor for the young man, and was very pleased with the result. Jin Hyuk was also pleasantly surprised when he came to the workshop and saw his new armor there. It was a mithril chainmail designed to be worn under clothing, making it discreet, lightweight, and durable. After the young man put on the armor, the dwarf immediately decided to test its strength and hit Jin Hyuk with his sledgehammer. Jin Hyuk didn't expect such a sudden attack, but nevertheless, he didn't feel any special damage, since the chainmail had the effect of reducing physical and magical damage by 50%. The young man was sincerely happy and grateful to the dwarf for what he had done for him, because now he had become more resilient and could fight stronger monsters. Meanwhile, the dwarf also presented him with a small gift. Arriving home, Jin Hyuk immediately decided to try the gift from the dwarf. It was real alcohol, which he had never tried before. The dwarf also told him that if you pour alcohol into a mithril barrel, the flavor will be enhanced, even for such a crappy drink as soju. Jin Hyuk then called Chun Chul, saying that he had some items to sell. Chun Chul was delighted to receive such a call, and was looking forward to hearing from Jin Hyuk what he wanted to offer him this time, and was surprised to hear about alcohol. Meanwhile, the appearance of new gates with monsters became more frequent, and what's more, their number also increased. The Titan Guild members asked Do Yoon to seek help from other hunters, as they couldn't handle that many monsters. However, Do Yoon didn't listen to them, as he didn't want to share monsters with others, and was sure that their guild was the strongest. So Do Yoon ordered everyone to cast aside their fear and fight the monsters. At the same time, Jin Hyuk headed to the association, where he was congratulated on his successful promotion, as well as on receiving the rare Priest class, which possessed healing skills. The young man was quite happy about this, because guilds hire healers, even if they treat from afar, and therefore his chances of joining one of them increased. At that moment, a man ran into the association and hastily asked for help from a free doctor. Jin Hyuk, being a C-rank doctor, offered his help, and he accepted. Meanwhile, the Titan Guild continued to fight against the huge number of monsters, although it was difficult for them. The boys fought to the death, and despite the fact that they understood how unequal the battle was and that they could die, no one disobeyed Do Yoon's order. Do Yoonu didn't care how many monsters were in front of him. He was ready to kill them all. At least, that's what he thought. Meanwhile, the man who ran to the association for help turned out to be a member of the Titan Guild and took Jin Hyuk straight to the battlefield. Despite the fact that there were several healers, it was not possible to change the course of the battle for the better. The monsters were stronger and outnumbered the hunters, so even the healers couldn't keep up with them. The young man understood that if things continued like this, they would all die here. And at the same time, he wondered why no one had turned to another guild for help. When Jin Hyuk's attention was fully focused on healing, the monster suddenly attacked him from behind, and it was only thanks to his bat that he survived. After this, Jin Hyuk decided to change his role in the battle and began to fight off the monsters attacking from the rear. This battle was like a march to certain death. There were so many monsters that the Titans had an extremely difficult time resisting them. Jin Hyuk asked the healers to focus on healing the Titans, while he fought off the monsters' attacks from behind. Even though his fighting skills weren't up to par, he fought the monsters without any trouble. At the same time, he tried to remain vigilant, because while he was fighting one monster, another could attack the healers. The monsters also tried to attack Jin Hyuk suddenly, but thanks to his mithril chainmail, the damage from their attacks was insignificant for him. While the other guys were admiring Jin Hyuk's strength, reinforcements arrived. It was So Sang-ho, the leader of the Titan Guild and an S-rank hunter, who dealt with several monsters in an instant. Sang-ho was surprised by how Jin Hyuk was able to repel the monster's attack from behind, as well as his skills. Without wasting a second, Sang-ho rushed to cut down the remaining monsters. His appearance gave the rest of the guild members confidence and hope for victory. Sang-ho asked everyone whose strength was running out to retreat, because now he would be leading the capture. Then, with one attack, Sang-ho managed to destroy an entire crowd of monsters. At that moment, Jin Hyuk realized the difference between the S-rank and the others. As a result, thanks to the appearance of the leader of the Titan Guild, the guys managed to repel the onslaught of the monsters. Sang-ho demanded an explanation from Do Yoon regarding what had happened, and asked what he was thinking when he tried to deal with the enemies himself. Do Yoon explained his actions by saying that asking others for help would cause the guild's reputation to plummet. However, Sang-ho stated that it was not about the guild at all, but that Do Yoon did not want to ruin his own reputation. Their conversation was interrupted by one of their guildmates, reminding them that they needed to thank the healers who had helped them today. Sang-ho warned Do Yoon that their conversation wasn't over, and that they would discuss it again upon returning to the guild. Sang-ho then apologized to the doctors for the wait, and also thanked them for their help. He expressed special gratitude to Jin Hyuk, saying that he had seen him single-handedly deal with the lizardmen who had set up an ambush, and also asked his name and whether he belonged to any guild. Upon learning that the young man was not yet a member of the guild, Sang-ho invited him to join, noting that there would be no entry fee, but Do Yoon objected. Do Yoon stated that Jin Hyuk was a D-rank hunter until recently, and he was just lucky enough to receive the priest class. Sang-ho replied that if it weren't for this young man, their fighters could have died, because it was he who saved the reputation that Do Yoon himself almost destroyed with his actions. He also demanded that Do Yoon apologize to Jin Hyuk if he understood everything, which Do Yoon was not happy about, as he did not think he had to apologize. Jin Hyuk thanked Sang-ho for the offer, but declined, saying that he couldn't trust a deputy of that level. These words made Do Yoon angry, and he wanted to teach the young man a lesson by showing the difference in their strength. But just as he was about to attack, Jin Hyuk's bat reacted to the attack and attacked him back. The next day, the incident was reported on the news, after which Song-ho announced Do-yoon's resignation. The other guild members demanded that Song-ho bring Jin-hyuk to refute what happened, otherwise silence would damage his reputation. Sang-ho explained that it wasn't Jin-hyuk who had ruined his reputation, but Do-yoon, because his authority almost got the newcomers killed, and he later attacked the one who came to their aid. He also noted that he considered this a compelling reason to remove Do-yoon from his deputy position, and suggested that the matter be closed. Sang-ho himself began to think about how to lure Jin-hyuk to his side, because despite his C rank, the young man had obvious potential. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk was surprised at himself, because with the money he earned, he bought a lot of things. Perhaps even too much. However, he still had a steady income, even though there were no longer enough regular monsters to hunt. Moreover, the young man himself became much stronger, and in order to grow further, he needed to fight more powerful opponents. While wandering through the dungeon, Jin-hyuk came across an orc, but it posed no threat to him. However, the orc turned out to be a good way to earn money for Jin-hyuk at the moment. In the end, Jin-hyuk easily defeated 20 orcs at once, and was looking forward to how much he could earn from them. Realizing that he could now kill 20 orcs at once, the young man decided to go a little deeper into the dungeon to see what awaited him there. Descending the stairs, he found himself on the 3rd level of the dungeon, Labyrinth of the Temple Defender. Jin-hyuk was surprised not to see any monsters nearby, and decided that he was in a safe zone. But as soon as he thought this, something suddenly attacked him from underground. Luckily, the young man managed to dodge the monster's attack at the last moment. Meanwhile, the monster turned out to be quite fast, and when Jin-hyuk tried to tie it up, it immediately broke free. Moreover, the monster's body was made of stone, and Jin-hyuk realized that it was a golem. Although the golem appeared terrifying and powerful, its intelligence was low, making it susceptible to even simple deception. Physically, the golem was certainly strong, but it could be outwitted and knocked down. As a result, even the golem was no problem for Jin-hyuk, and his victory was only a matter of time. However, not everything was so simple, because one of the golem's features was the ability to regenerate. The golem was similar to the skeleton Jin-hyuk had fought before. Both could only be defeated by destroying the core. Suddenly, another golem appeared and grabbed Jin-hyuk's leg the moment he let his guard down. Just when it seemed the situation couldn't get any worse, someone suddenly shot an arrow straight into the golem's body. After a precise hit, the golem's body fell apart, and the arrow pierced its core. Having learned the location of the core, Jin-hyuk attacked the second golem and easily defeated it. If it weren't for that arrow, Jin-hyuk might have died, and he wondered who had saved him. Could it have been the dwarf? But soon he noticed an approaching silhouette, more reminiscent of a girl. His guesses turned out to be correct. It was a girl who looked like an elf. Jin-hyuk didn't have time to really process what was happening and thank her before she immediately grabbed him. The girl noted that she was seeing him in the dungeon for the first time and demanded to know who he was and where he was from. After the young man explained and told her how he got there, the girl let him go. Moreover, she demanded that Jin-hyuk lead her to the exit through which he himself entered the dungeon. The young man did not quite understand who she was and why he should obey her orders. Meanwhile, the girl finally introduced herself. Her name was Lucia. She was a half-elf and a white gold rank mercenary. She showed him the mercenary badge, but Jin-hyuk was still confused, as it was the first time he had seen something like this. Lucia asked him if he was from a remote village if he didn't recognize the badge. Jin-hyuk replied that he was from Seoul and asked Lucia where she was from, as he had never heard of elves living in Korea. Lucia also heard about Seoul and Korea for the first time, and began to suspect that that mad magician had managed to cross the border between the worlds. She also asked Jin-hyuk if this was his first time in the dungeon, and he replied that he had been there several times. After this, her suspicions were confirmed. The wizard managed to activate the magic of interdimensional transition, as a result of which the dungeon ended up in another world. And if a wizard has managed to move between dimensions, it might be possible to return back. It is only necessary to improve his magical techniques. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk asked her if she really wanted to return the dungeon back to her world, to which she replied that it was impossible now. Lucia also asked the young man for help, saying that there was a secret room on this floor that could only be accessed by defeating the boss. As a reward, she would tell him something important and give him everything that the boss dropped. Jin-hyuk didn't catch any trick in her words. The conditions were good, so he agreed. After this, Jin-hyuk and Lucia set off to look for the boss room, fighting monsters along the way. Thanks to their coordinated work, defeating monsters was easy, and this made them both happy. Lucia admitted that she didn't expect Jin-hyuk to be so strong, and he thought the same about her. The fighting had left Jin-hyuk a little tired, so he suggested taking a break. Lucia didn't mind, especially since there were no monsters around, and the rest would do her good. Meanwhile, the young man offered Lucia a Snickers, addressing her as Miss. To this, Lucia asked to address her as you, without any myths or formalities. Jin Hyuk replied that he couldn't address someone older than himself that way, so Lucia pointed her bow at him, saying that by elven standards, she was still very young. The young man explained that he didn't mean age and agreed to address her informally, after which Lucia said that she doesn't eat any nonsense. However, it turned out to be easy to convince her. Once she tried the sweetness, she couldn't stop. In the end, Lucia ate all 3 boxes of sweets that Jin Hyuk brought with him. Then Lucia suggested that they continue on their way, since they had already rested and refreshed themselves. After walking forward a little, they finally found the secret room with the boss. Jin Hyuk asked what exactly she wanted to find in the room, and Lucia replied that perhaps the mage had left notes of his spells there. Moreover, she was going to fight the boss alone, and all Jin Hyuk had to do was finish the fight. Meanwhile, Lucia showed Jin Hyuk what she wanted to tell him, calling it an aura. The boss, who looked terrifying and seemed strong at first glance, was defeated by Lucia in an instant. Lucia explained to Jin Hyuk that this powerful strike was called aura, and as promised, she would teach him this technique. She noted that she would definitely train him, but first, she needed to finish off the boss. Then Jin Hyuk tried to deliver the finishing blow, because to win, he needed to destroy the core. But it was not as simple as it seemed. Lucia noticed a strange glow emanating from the young man, reminiscent of an aura. Jin Hyuk didn't give up and continued trying to destroy the boss's core. He was determined to keep hitting until he broke the core and defeated the monster. As a result, after a few hits, Jin Hyuk managed to defeat the boss and raise his level from 150 to 185. Jin Hyuk then asked Lucia to teach him aura, but she was surprised because he had already used it. Jin Hyuk said that he considered it a skill, which Lucia was even more surprised at, noting that in that case, learning would go faster. Furthermore, since he is a priest, divine power is also a form of aura, meaning he is already capable of using it. Jin Hyuk was looking forward to starting the training, but Lucia reminded him that they had one more condition. Meanwhile, Sang-ho's secretary, Lee Hyun-na, informed him that anomalies were spotted near Gangnam Station yesterday, and that powerful monsters would appear in 5 days. Sang-ho noted that their guild alone would not be able to cope, since the other major guilds are now abroad, and they are the only ones left in Korea. Lee Hyun-na said she is already looking for freelance hunters working in Korea. Sang-ho replied that he already had a candidate, and then, by a lucky chance, he saw Jin Hyuk passing by. After that, he told Lee Hyun to return to the office, and he himself went to take care of personal matters. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk was returning home from the store, having bought a lot of sweets for Lucia. At that moment, Sang-ho approached him and was surprised at how many sweets he had collected. On the way, Sang-ho asked him if he had thought about joining the guild, and Jin Hyuk replied that he had already refused. But Sang-ho offered to become a mercenary for a good reward. Promising to think about it, Jin Hyuk headed back to the dungeon to see Lucia. After Lucia ate all the sweets, she told Jin Hyuk to look at the ceiling, where there was a magic circle that he knew nothing about. Lucia didn't explain anything, she just said that for her, this dungeon was the path to his world, and for now, she would stay here to explore it, and for training in aura, she would need sweets. After that, she grabbed his hand, saying that this was the fastest way to master the aura, and told him to concentrate. Streams of aura began to flow into Jin Hyuk's body, and this sensation was new and memorable for him. Lucia then said that Jin Hyuk had potential if he could remember this aura flow. Jin Hyuk asked if there was a way to master the aura faster, and there really was such a way. It was practice. However, he himself did not fully understand the meaning of the practice, because Lucia said that she would teach him, but he himself only hunted monsters. Lucia explained that she had only promised to share mana so that he would understand the principle. The rest he would have to master himself. Activate the aura and learn to use it with divine power. The girl added that in critical situations, a person is extremely focused, so this method would suit him best. She also advised me to concentrate and feel the divine power, since that shield in the boss fight was also summoned using aura. And to master a technique, it is enough to understand its principle. And it seems that the young man began to succeed. Lucia had said that he should feel something from this skill, but Jin Hyuk wasn't quite sure what she meant. After some time, Jin Hyuk finally felt something, as if energy had entered him from the outside, and he felt it gathering in his left hand, which activated the skill. Jin Hyuk didn't fully understand whether this was truly divine power, so he decided to try summoning the sacred shield again. This time, he managed to recreate the shield, but its shape turned out to be very strange. As soon as Jin Hyuk let his guard down for a moment, his shield was immediately destroyed by the golem. At that moment, Lucia told him to focus on his feelings so as not to make stupid mistakes. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk also gained a new skill, divine power utilization, which, when used, grants him sacred energy, increasing his attack and defense power proportionally to the divine power consumed. Lucia noted that the training phase with golems could be difficult and wanted to help him. However, Jin-hyuk asked her not to interfere, saying that he was going to handle it himself. As soon as the young man managed to concentrate, remembering those very sensations and putting all his mana into the bat, with one powerful blow, he was able to defeat the golem. And finally, using his divine power, he destroyed the golem's core with a powerful attack. Lucia was surprised, because although she knew that Jin-hyuk was very capable, she didn't think that he would be able to use aura so quickly in battle. Initially, the girl was going to explain everything to him in a few words and end it there, but it turned out completely differently. Jin-hyuk was also happy that he was able to discover something powerful, and thanks to his training with Lucia, he now has 3 passive skills, as well as 1 active skill that he can use in battle. Lucia then pointed her bow at Jin-hyuk and said that since he was finished, it was time to move on. The young man thought that she wanted to test him again, but this was not entirely true. There was simply a passage to another room behind him, or rather, behind that door, there was a whole bunch of monsters that the young man would have to deal with. Jin-hyuk, of course, didn't particularly like this arrangement, but nevertheless, he didn't feel afraid. After training with Lucia, Jin-hyuk went to meet Chun-chul, who was quite alarmed by his appearance. However, the young man explained this by saying that he had been very tired lately and had not had time to rest. Chun-chul decided not to go into details and said that he was ready to buy from him everything that he brought: goblin, kobold, and orc pipes. But regarding alcohol, he had another idea. After which, Jin-hyuk began selling soju under the guise of a traditional drink from a true master for 150,000 per bottle. And surprisingly, it sold out immediately. Returning home, the young man decided to rest for the first time since he left the dungeon. Meanwhile, after talking with Lucia, he felt that the girl was from another world, and the skills that were common to them were simply absent in her world. And to activate, the girl uses not keywords, but mana flows, so she cannot use skills as easily, but she can use them in different ways. Thinking about this, Jin-hyuk didn't even notice how he instantly fell asleep, and slept until the morning, and would have slept longer if not for one but. Suddenly, a warning about a natural disaster appeared, and only after waking up, the young man did not understand what was happening. Looking at the date on his phone, Jin-hyuk understood everything. Today was the day the monsters appeared. But he decided that this was the concern of the guilds and the association, and went back to sleep. And he would have continued sleeping if it weren't for the association's announcement that they were increasing the reward for destroying monsters to 3 times the usual rate. In an instant, Jin-hyuk was already ready to fight the monsters, as if he had been waiting for this day. Monster invasions are usually random, but there are also regular appearances. And once a month, around the end of the month, there are major monster invasions. These days, it is important for as many hunters as possible to take part, and it is also a good opportunity to show off your skills and earn money. Moreover, it is also important to remain vigilant so that the monster does not cut off your head from behind. The main fighting force at the moment was San-ho, but even he was gradually losing strength, and the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk also fought the monsters, killing them one after another. At that moment, Lee Hyun called him and asked for his help, promising the best reward and cooperation under the conditions he would name. The young man noted that in that case, he would like to receive 5 times more for one monster, if that suits them. After this, Lee Hyun and Jin-hyuk met in a safer place, where they discussed all the details, but they could not promise a reward greater than 4 times. Jin-hyuk tried to persuade her to give him 5 times the reward, but Lee Hyun-na reminded him that he was only a C-rank hunter with the priest class. The young man decided to agree to her proposal, saying that by doing so, he was meeting them halfway. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun gave him a monster counter that measures magical power and converts it into points. Suddenly, they were attacked by goblins, but thanks to Jin-hyuk's quick reaction, he easily dealt with them and received 2 points for the 2 goblins. Lee Hyun noted that currently, frontline hunters have already earned an average of 82 points, and if the young man wants a decent reward, he should exceed this figure. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk asked her if she knew what real healing was, but this was the first time Lee Hyun had heard about it. The young man explained that destroying the one who causes damage is the extreme form of healing. After this, the confident Jin-hyuk rushed to the battlefield to destroy as many monsters as possible. Using his newly discovered skill, Divine Power Application, the young man dispatched the vile monsters in an instant. Jin-hyuk caused great surprise among the other hunters, because just before their eyes, he had knocked down a huge ogre with one blow. Thanks to training with Lucia, Jin-hyuk managed to raise his level to 200, but even initially, he didn't have enough strength to fight the ogre. However, if he could constantly maintain his mana, he would become stronger than A-rank hunters, and to do this, he only needed to drink potions, of which he had over 1,000. The other hunters began to notice that at one point, the number of monsters became significantly smaller. Everyone was amazed at how one hunter could deal with such a crowd of monsters, and this caused them to truly admire him. Do-yoon, seeing Jin-hyuk, at first didn't understand what he was doing there, and wanted to teach him a lesson for that very incident. But this time, he again failed, because the young man noticed the approach in time and, reacting quickly, attacked. Meanwhile, San-ho suddenly started having problems. His mana was almost at 0, and a powerful monster appeared in front of him. He found himself in a very difficult situation, because before fighting such a monster, it would be a good idea to restore his mana. But just when Sang-ho thought he was about to face one of his toughest battles, Jin-hyuk appeared and defeated the monster in an instant. Sang-ho was pleasantly surprised that Jin-hyuk decided to join them, and was even more amazed at how the young man knocked down the Minotaur in an instant. After this, San-ho thanked the young man for his help, but he said that it was not worth it, since he simply took advantage of the chance to make money after the secretary's call. San-ho decided that in that case, it would be a good idea to invite the young man to join his guild again, adding that he would have many similar opportunities. But Jin-hyuk didn't answer directly, only saying that they needed to deal with the remaining monsters first. At that moment, something strange began to happen. The weather changed abruptly, and a strange cloud appeared in the sky. And before anyone could understand anything, suddenly thunder and lightning were heard, and a giant monster began to appear from the cloud itself. Despite the fact that the hunters were faced with an unknown threat, and it was unclear how strong the monster was, no one retreated. However, the monster turned out to be much stronger and more dangerous than it seemed at first, and it could also fly, which made the fight more difficult. Even drones were deployed, but it was not possible to get close to the monster. Lee Hyun-na noted that the monster had 100% accuracy in hitting any target within a kilometer, and Sang-ho said that they would have to attack from cover, outside the lightning's range. Jin-hyuk thought that to defeat such a monster, he needed someone who could destroy it from a long distance, and the only one who came to mind was Lucia. The young man then told San-ho that he seemed to have an idea on how to destroy the huge monster. After this, Sang-ho organized a meeting to discuss Jin-hyuk's plan. One of the Titan Guild leaders, Han Yeon-suk, asked Sang-ho if he really intended to trust a certain C-rank priest. Others suggested renting a helicopter and trying to hit the monster from a distance of just over 300 meters, claiming they could destroy it with one blow. San-ho reminded that the monster destroys any target with a 100% probability within a kilometer radius, so this method won't work. Lee Hyun-na said that since things were so complicated, they would have to wait for help from the Getia Guild. But Sang-ho replied that they couldn't be relied on. He explained that even though Getia was made up of A-rank mages who could deal with a monster in seconds, they didn't care about people's safety. San-ho added that these mages only think about catching the monster, not about protecting the residents. He noted that if they simply watched from the sidelines, there would be less destruction, and therefore, all that remained was to hope for Jin-hyuk and his plan. At this time, Jin-hyuk was already leading Lucia through the portal to his world, thanking her for agreeing to help. In exchange for her help, Lucia asked Jin-hyuk to bring her all the sweets from his world. As they approached the monster, Jin-hyuk asked Lucia if she could destroy it. Lucia replied that she could get into such a colossus even with her eyes closed, even if it was a level 300 Leviathan. She also noted that Jin-hyuk should help her a little, as the situation here was too unstable for a powerful attack. Then the young man called San-ho and asked him to prepare for the fact that after his death, the monster could fall on the city, which must be avoided. At this time, Lucia had already prepared her bow and was ready to attack the Leviathan. At the moment of the shot, Jin-hyuk erected a shield to prevent destruction around him, after which 2 projectiles flew at incredible speed straight towards the monster, and in an instant, the Leviathan was defeated. Lucia's arrows pierced it through, leaving a huge hole. Even though Jin-hyuk had set up a shield in advance to protect the surrounding area, part of it was still hit, and the young man couldn't believe that someone could be that strong. Lucia said that this world was simply too weak and handed him a monster counter. Before leaving, she also advised Jin-hyuk to be as careful as possible and not to trust anyone. She added that when there is a big prize at stake, people lose their minds, and she had been betrayed more than once while she was a hunter. Jin-hyuk replied that she had nothing to worry about, because if he suspected anything, he would let her know right away. On the way, San-ho met Jin-hyuk and was very happy because he wanted to thank him for everything. The young man said he was just lucky. And when San-ho asked how he destroyed the Leviathan, he replied that it was a secret. With him was also Yong-seok, who was furious that the young man was hiding everything, claiming that it was clearly not him who did it. But when Jin Hyuk handed him the monster counter, all doubts disappeared. It showed 240 points, while Sang-ho only had 173. Jin Hyuk reminded him that the guild leader had promised him something, since he was the one who caught the monster, and it was about a special reward. Young Seok asked the young man if he knew how much the monster's body was worth, and added that stupid arguments wouldn't work on the guild, so he'd better leave quietly. After this, Sang-ho intervened, telling Young-suk to stop talking because their guild was not in poverty at all, and besides, authority was more important than any money. Then Young-suk left, and Sang-ho, apologizing to the young man, said that, as promised, he would pay him and provide him with the rights to the monster's corpse. Meanwhile, Young-suk didn't like the fact that Sang-ho chose Jin Hyuk's side, and he was already thinking about how to get rid of him. After the Leviathan was defeated, people began to guess who exactly killed it, since Sang-ho officially stated this, but some believed that it was the C-rank hunter. At this time, interest in Jin Hyuk began to grow, and the Ultron Guild decided to either lure him away or destroy him. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk himself was resting, falling asleep again for several days. The first thing the young man wanted to do was order food, and was very surprised when, upon leaving the room, he saw Lucia. But he was even more surprised when he saw what she had turned the house into. Candy wrappers were lying everywhere. Lucia noted that the sweets were too delicious, and she could not resist, especially since they were the only edible things she found. The girl added that she did not go into the dungeon because she was looking after him. Besides, even if she wanted to leave, she couldn't, because Jin Hyuk didn't open the entrance to the dungeon for her. The young man did not understand what she was talking about, and showed that the portal had been open all this time. Then Lucia asked him to move away and tried to open the door herself. However, when she opened the door to the room, the portal was not there. Lucia explained that it was because a crazy magician placed Jin Hyuk in the dimensional travel indicator. She explained that in this case, the dungeon's ultimate goal is itself, so the portal appears where it is. After this, Jin Hyuk began to worry about what would happen if one day a dungeon fell right on his head. Meanwhile, the delivery arrived, and the courier apologized for being late, saying that he had been unable to find the apartment for a long time. Lucia was surprised that the courier found them, because the house had been magically enchanted to reduce its visibility. It wouldn't be found even by address. Jin Hyuk asked why she did it, and she replied that some strange people came to him while he was sleeping. According to her, these were people from a certain Ultron, but she did not open the door to them and cast magic so that they would not interfere. Jin Hyuk didn't understand what had happened during this time, if even Ultron had become interested in him. At the same time, the news reported that it was he who defeated the Leviathan, and they even posted a video, which the young man was extremely surprised about. Jin Hyuk didn't think things would turn out this way, because although it was profitable to pass off Lucia's achievements as his own, fame came with it. But fame in guilds is dangerous, because hazing is rampant there. Every new strong person becomes a target in the race for leadership. Therefore, Jin Hyuk decided not to waste time and, taking Lucia, went back to the dungeon. Now he wants to avoid meeting with hunters and guilds and become even stronger. And in order to become stronger, you need to kill a lot of monsters and get powerful items. The first thing he decided to do was visit the old dwarf and bring him the head of the Leviathan. Lucia added that they managed to save only the head, since the monster couldn't withstand her arrows, to which the dwarf muttered that such eared creatures were of little use. After which a verbal altercation began between them, and Jin Hyuk, watching this, did not know how to stop them. Not wanting to listen to the argument, Jin Hyuk asked if something could be made from the Leviathan's head. The dwarf was surprised that the young man brought him the head, not knowing what kind of monster it was, and asked him to wait a little. Putting his hand to it, the dwarf realized that the Leviathan was still alive, and sticking his hand into the flesh, he took out the most valuable thing from it. He explained that it was thanks to this thing, similar to a ball of lightning, that the Leviathan could shoot, and if he can enchant the bat, Jin Hyuk will also be able to shoot lightning. Jin Hyuk asked what he needed as payment, but the dwarf said that it would be okay if he kicks the elf out of the workshop. Lucia, of course, was outraged, and was about to pierce the dwarf, but Jin Hyuk stopped her. After that, he left the dungeon and went again to get sweets for Lucia, wondering how she could eat so much. On his way home, he felt a strange sensation, as if someone was watching him from the shadows. Jin Hyuk decided not to hide, but to challenge his pursuer, and ordered him to come out. But no one responded to his words, and silence reigned. At least, that's what it seemed at first glance. Suddenly, a stranger with a knife, dressed all in black, jumped out of the tunnel and attacked him. A fight broke out between them, during which Jin Hyuk tried to figure out who he was and why he attacked. There was no answer, so the young man wanted to kill him instantly. but the enemy disappeared the moment he struck. In fact, the enemy did not disappear, but only hid and continued to try to attack unexpectedly. The young man was angry that he couldn't finish off the spy, because if he had had a regular bat, everything would have gone differently. Jin Hyuk realized that the situation was bad and decided to escape as quickly as possible. At that moment, the pursuer shot him in the back and put on a beacon, after which he moved after Jin Hyuk and found him in one of the district buildings. Moreover, this building turned out to be a shopping center, and the only place to hide was the toilet, where the beacon led. Having reached the toilet, the killer decided not to hesitate, and, having activated his disguise, unexpectedly broke down the door with a knife in order to immediately kill the young man. But he was not there. As soon as the killer realized that Jin Hyuk had finally found out about the beacon, he suddenly appeared behind him. Eventually, Jin Hyuk managed to knock him to the ground and demand an explanation of who he was and why he had come. Before entering the restroom, Jin Hyuk put up a sign saying it was under renovation to prevent anyone from entering, but one child ignored it. And as soon as he entered, he saw Jin Hyuk about to beat up the killer if he continued to remain silent. The moment Jin Hyuk's attention was slackened and he wasn't looking at his opponent, he decided to take the chance to kill him. However, the young man managed to create a sacred shield to block the enemy's attack and protect the child. Realizing he had made a mistake, the killer decided to escape as quickly as possible, hoping to kill Jin Hyuk another time. But he didn't have time to escape. At the last moment, Jin Hyuk threw a bat at him and pierced his body. After this, Jin Hyuk felt disgusted, because this was his first murder, albeit in self-defense. The system then notified him that due to the justifiable homicide, his karma had increased, but he did not receive the title of villain. His priest skill also changed, and in addition, he fulfilled the hidden condition for his second-class promotion. Usually, when a hunter kills, he gets the title villain, which blocks the skill priest. So Jin Hyuk thought all was lost, but the class changed. Then Cho Kyung-young from the Detective Department's Hunter Division approached the young man and asked him to tell him what had happened. Jin Hyuk told him everything and also asked if everything was okay with that child. The detective's assistant replied that the child was fine and that he and his father had asked him to convey their thanks. Kyung-yeon noted that thanks to Jin Hyuk's quick reaction, consequences were avoided and self-defense should be recognized. Once the investigation is complete, the young man will be able to return home peacefully because his actions will also be taken into account, and the laws for hunters are different. Finally, Kyung-young said that since Jin Hyuk doesn't have the title of villain, this is considered self-defense, but it's better to keep quiet about it. However, he added that they needed to be careful and gave Jin Hyuk a tracking device that would be triggered by the words murder, villain, and self-defense. After this, Jin Hyuk was finally able to go home to rest after what happened. Meanwhile, Kyung-young wanted to earn the young man's trust, because even though he seemed like an ordinary C-rank hunter, his strength was much higher. After returning home, Jin Hyuk decided to see what hidden class had opened up, and that class turned out to be Judge. Without further ado, he decided to test it out, and realized that the skills Healing and Lure had been replaced by Hard Skin, which reduced damage. He also gained the Status Resistance skill, which increases his defense against poison, sleep, and paralysis. Now Jin Hyuk began to understand why it was called a transformation. The effects remained, but became more defensive-oriented. Although he could no longer use Holy Aura, he gained the skill Fighting Spirit, which converted will into aura. And instead of Sacred Shield, he now has access to Protection Charge, which allows him to attack and defend simultaneously. Such a set of skills could not help but please Jin Hyuk, because now the path to power became much shorter. He also gained the skill Judgment, which allows him to determine the opponent's karma in numbers. Now he saw karma numbers above people's heads, although he still didn't understand what they meant. In addition, he received another skill related to karma, Judgment, which enhances his abilities when fighting those with high karma. Simply put, Jin Hyuk became stronger by fighting bad guys. After testing out the new class, he went to the dwarf to pick up the upgraded bat, now capable of firing lightning bolts that could be charged 3 times, each time for 30 minutes. And he was able to test the bat on a kobold caught during an attempt to rob a workshop. The dwarf explained that no spell was needed to release lightning. It was enough to simply imagine the discharge. The young man began to try to imagine lightning, and it seemed that he was starting to succeed. He did everything as the dwarf said, and he succeeded. He struck the monster with lightning. After that, only a pool of blood remained in its place. Before Jin Hyuk had time to enjoy the weapon, Lucia approached him and demanded to know what he had been doing. She noticed that she no longer felt divine power from him and wondered if he was planning something strange with this suspicious object. After that, Jin Hyuk tried to explain everything, avoiding words that the device reacts to. However, it was impossible to explain properly, So the dwarf suggested that they first figure out the device and then talk. But before that, he gave him one task, promising to deal with the surveillance if he completed it. The dwarf handed over the compass, saying that it would be useful, and Lucia asked if he really intended to send the young man there. Jin-hyuk didn't fully understand what was happening, where they wanted to send him, and what there meant. Nevertheless, he headed towards that very there, although he still did not know where he was going. The place turned out to be like a canyon, inside of which was the ore the dwarf needed. And in order to get it, Jin-hyuk had to go down to the bottom. Lucia was also with him, hurrying him along, saying that it was just a cliff and there was nothing special about it. While Jin-hyuk was trying to climb down with extreme caution, Lucia, as if she was not afraid of anything, simply jumped off. The young man decided not to lag behind her, and letting go of the rope, also jumped down. In the end, he succeeded, and it turned out to be not as scary as he imagined. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk told Lucia that he had actually lost his sacred power, which is why he brought the tracking device with him. But the dwarf promised to help get rid of it. Lucia also wanted to know his karma level, and Jin-hyuk replied that hers was 82, the highest among them, since even the dwarf only had 72. Lucia noted that she had to endure a difficult life, so it is not surprising because she was literally surviving. Jin-hyuk said that there was only a 20-point difference between them, although he had only killed one, to which Lucia replied that they didn't yet know whether that was a lot or a little, since she hadn't killed hundreds either. She also said that in her world, saints sometimes appeared who were able to distinguish good from evil at a glance, and the ability to see karma also existed there. Lucia said that now was not the time to look for the mine, and suggested that they focus on his abilities instead. Jin-hyuk didn't understand why this was necessary, to which the girl replied that he was very interesting, and studying his abilities was 100 times more exciting than looking for a worthless mine. Besides, sitting here, they still wouldn't learn anything about karma. The young man decided to agree with Lucia, and taking out the Stone of Return, teleported back. However, immediately after the teleportation, the system notified him that his karma level had increased. After that, the guys went into town and decided to have a little snack before doing some karma. Meanwhile, to avoid attracting attention, Lucia disguised her clothes as more familiar to people, but everything turned out the other way around, and everyone's eyes were focused on her. However, Lucia asked Jin-hyuk not to be distracted, as they needed to sum things up, and it became clear that karma accumulates when they do what is considered bad. Therefore, as soon as Jin-hyuk broke the promise he made to the dwarf, his karma increased. But if the harm was caused mutually, karma does not change. In addition, if the level of karma exceeds 200, a person is considered a villain, and killing such a person does not entail punishment. Lucia noted that even the dwarf's level was below 100, so finding someone with a karma above 200 would be difficult. Then they went to the place where the really bad people most often gathered, and the chance of finding one was the highest. On the way, they were met by a decent-looking guy who suggested they go to a bar where the protest was supposedly taking place. Lucia replied that she was not interested and told him to leave. Jin-hyuk, on the contrary, tried to persuade her to change her mind, since it was free and why shouldn't they have a drink? He suggested not to refuse so easily, because he saw a whole 300 karma points above the guy's head. The alcohol seemed sweet and tasty, but in reality it contained poison, a drop of which paralyzes the body. After this, a couple of guys tried to grab Jin-hyuk and Lucia, thinking that they were already immobilized. However, thanks to the new skill Status Resistance, the poison was neutralized, and Jin-hyuk struck down one of the attackers with a powerful blow. When the first one flew back a few meters, he immediately switched to the second one and kicked him in the head. Besides them, there was another one who looked stronger and more experienced. However, no matter how strong he was, he posed no threat to Jin-hyuk. The young man said that he looked like a hunter and asked why he had done this while playing a bandit. The guy was about to run, but Jin-hyuk squeezed his fist so hard that it felt like the bones in his palm were crushed. And in the end, only one enemy remained. Jin-hyuk then walked up to the last one, who was playing the role of the bartender, and taught him a lesson. After this, he demanded an explanation of who he was, why he was doing all this, and who was behind him. But the guy was silent, and Jin-hyuk couldn't understand whether he was too loyal or simply afraid of his patrons more than beatings. Jin-hyuk was about to take extreme measures, but Lucia stopped him and asked him to step away. After that, she used magic similar to Truth Serum. Then the guy began to stutter about the guilds, mentioning that Ultron was nothing compared to Tyrant, and that they would soon destroy everyone. Jin-hyuk was surprised to learn that the Tyrant Guild was behind everything, and asked why they were confident that they would win the guild war. The guy replied that they had a certain elixir of Al-Ran, and all their power was in it. Thus, Jin-hyuk and Lucia learned of an impending guild war in which the Tyrant plans to use a potion that doubles stats, But to create it, many young girls are sacrificed. Lucia was also shocked because she didn't expect that there would be such madmen in Jin Hyuk's world. She explained that something similar existed in her world, the Queen's Tears, and that her childhood friend was sacrificed for the elixir. When she reached platinum rank, she personally destroyed that organization. Jin Hyuk was amazed by her story and said that he now understood why she was so gloomy. But now this elixir must be destroyed here too. Meanwhile, a member of the Tyrant Guild arrived at the bar to report what had happened. The management immediately ordered him to find the culprits and eliminate them at any cost. At the same time, the Titan Guild was on an overseas mission where they achieved good results, and Lee Hyun noted that if they continued in the same spirit, they would be able to increase the number of members by 15%. Meanwhile, Sang-ho asked Lee Hyun if she had ever heard of the elixir Ultraun. Lee Hyun-na replied that this was the first time she had heard of such a thing, and Sang-ho added that it was not surprising, since the association was diligently hiding information. Sang-ho also asked if there would be any difficulties returning to Korea, and Lee Hyun-na became concerned, replying that the mission had not yet been completed, meaning there might be problems. After this, Sang-ho ordered that all guild members be given the order that from now on, they would declare hostility towards the Tyrant Guild. He noted that he had received information about the guild's actions, and if he did not act now, things would only get worse. Sang-ho said that he understood the possible consequences, but there was no need to worry, because the Ultron Guild and the government would support them. Lee Hyun expressed concern, noting that war carries great risks, and suggested discussing everything at the council to make an informed decision. Sang-ho was upset that Lee Hyun doubted him so much, and stated that he was not the type to start wars over trivial matters. Meanwhile, he asked Lee Hyun to announce this within the guild, prepare investigators, and postpone the official statement. Sang-ho also said that he learned about the Tyrant Guild's plans from Jin Hyuk, and would contact him as soon as he assembled a team. Lucia, having learned what fun awaited them, declared that she would not return to the dungeon because she could not miss something like that. At the same time, someone knocked on Jin Hyuk's door, which surprised him greatly as he wasn't expecting anyone. The guest turned out to be the same member of the Tyrant Guild who arrived at the place where the bloody clothes of the bartender named Park Min-jae, killed by Jin Hyuk, remained. As soon as Jin Hyuk opened the door, the enemy immediately attacked him, trying to pierce his face with a sharp object. Lucia shouted at Jin Hyuk to duck, and at the same moment fired her bow straight at the enemy. The enemy was taken by surprise before he could understand anything, and at that very moment found himself outside the house. The force of the arrow was so powerful that it pinned him to the wall of a nearby building, preventing him from falling. Realizing that he was trapped, the enemy decided to retreat and run as far as possible. Lucia asked Jin Hyuk why he was doing nothing, whether he was not going to catch up with the killer, but he replied that it was pointless because he would still return. Jin Hyuk added that that guy had a karma of over 900, which meant that killing a person for him was like breathing air. The next day, Jin Hyuk and Lucia went to the investigation site with the Titan Guild. However, the young man had to be careful, as many of the guild members still harbored hatred towards him. As soon as Jin Hyuk saw Yeon-suk, he became a little tense, because in their last meeting, Yeon-suk wanted to start a fight with him, and now he was leading the investigation. Jin Hyuk told Yeon-suk that he was kinder today than last time, to which Yeon-suk responded with an apology, saying that he was too immersed in guild affairs. Meanwhile, Yeon-suk asked who the girl next to him was, and Jin Hyuk replied that she was his colleague, and she was experienced enough not to interfere. Yeon-suk was surprised, saying that no colleague had been reported, but the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the reconnaissance team. He approached them, continuing to wonder what kind of experienced colleague Jin Hyuk was, since she was most likely an ordinary C-class girl. However, he didn't care, because the main thing was achieving his own goal. Lucia said that Yeon-suk looked suspicious and asked Jin Hyuk what they should do now. The young man replied that there was no need to worry, that everything would turn out differently, and in passing, he noted that someone had been following them for a long time. He also gave Lucia a communication item that could be used to contact anyone within a 10-kilometer radius. Meanwhile, Yeon-suk approached Jin Hyuk and informed him that his report was true, and the Tyrant Guild was indeed involved in human trafficking. Yeon-suk also asked for a favor, explaining that there was a powerful barrier around the building, and only Jin Hyuk could pass through it undetected. Jin Hyuk asked if they really wanted him to risk his life, but Yeon-suk replied that they just wanted him to scout things out since he had enough experience. He added that this shouldn't be a problem for Jin Hyuk, since he was able to defeat even a Leviathan on his own. Jin Hyuk understood that he simply didn't want to risk himself, but still, this was exactly the chance he was waiting for. On the way, he was told the plan. The guild members would create a short-term hole in the barrier through which he would penetrate inside. You need to act quickly, because the hole will only be open for a few seconds. When they approached the barrier, the guild members used their skills to create a temporary hole in it. Immediately after this, Jin Hyuk infiltrated inside to find out what exactly the Tyrant Guild was hiding. As soon as he was inside, he immediately noticed something strange. Everything looked different from the outside, as if the barrier was distorting the appearance. He expected to see a lot of security, but in reality, there were far fewer guards than he had expected. However, when he tried to attack one of them, it disappeared. It turned out to be just an illusion. From this point on, difficulties began, because he had hoped to use the guard to open the inner door. Jin Hyuk was very surprised when the door opened by itself, even though there was no one around. Just in case, he took out an EMP device made from the materials of an electric monster from his inventory. This device was needed to disable any system or communication, so before that, he gave Lucia a communication item. After activation, the signal disappeared, and many devices stopped working. Meanwhile, the same guy who had previously tried to kill Jin Hyuk approached the place where the barrier was located, but he did not intervene, deciding that the young man would only make their task easier. After all the devices stopped working, one of the guards became furious, not understanding what was happening. Before he could even comprehend why his phone had suddenly gone dead, he was immediately hit with a bat. While wandering around, Jin Hyuk came across a place that resembled a prison, where kidnapped women were kept as if they were just fertilizer. However, in addition to women, in one of the cells he saw a man whose face seemed familiar to him. The stranger told him to leave before it was too late, adding that everyone here seemed to have gone mad. Meanwhile, Yeon-suk and the rest of the guys surrounded the area to support Jin Hyuk if necessary. Lucia decided not to go with them, because before leaving, Jin Hyuk said that he could handle it himself, and asked her to closely monitor the guild members, especially Yeon-suk. However, she quickly got bored of sitting still, and she decided to take part in the operation. Jin Hyuk, meanwhile, learned that the man's name was Jung Dae-yoon, and he was a former member of the Tyrant Guild who had been imprisoned for attempting to destroy the Al-Raun, only being spared because of his ability to create illusions. The reason for his action was that he could no longer bear to watch his guild feed people to monsters. Jin Hyuk was surprised that Dae-yoon only had 62 karma and decided to help him if he helped him in return. At this time, the person on duty in the monitoring room woke up and noticed that something had gone wrong. He ran into the room with the others, declaring an alarm, adding that the system was down and all the women were missing. After this, they rushed to search for the women and tried to establish contact with the main group. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk and Dae-yoon began evacuating the captives, trying to take them to a safe place. However, one of the Tyrant members managed to reach them and informed the others about it. He recognized Dae-yoon because it was he who had beaten him earlier, and now he intended to take revenge. But everything turned out to be useless, since with the help of illusions, Dae-yoon managed to escape. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk dealt with the guards without much difficulty. He approached the most guarded door, assuming that the elixir was behind it. As soon as he entered, his guess was confirmed. The guild really did use women to create Al-Raun. Jin Hyuk decided that this was a great opportunity to get rid of the monster right now, and swung at its capsule. But the monster suddenly moved and attacked him, destroying the capsule. The creature broke out, and the situation for Jin Hyuk became much more complicated. The monster attacked with its tentacles, and Jin Hyuk dodged with all his might to avoid being hit. At times, the attacks hit their target, causing pain to Jin Hyuk. Despite this, he did not give up, believing in his strength and everything he had achieved. By focusing on the battle, he became more effective in repelling attacks. He even managed to cause serious damage by piercing the monster with a bat. He then finished off the monster with a bolt of lightning to ensure its death. There was a powerful explosion, and all that remained of the monster were memories. At the sight of the monster's death, he found the Al-Rauna magic stone, but, not feeling anything, he decided to ask the dwarf about it later. After this, Jin Hyuk contacted Lucia, telling her about everything and about Dae-yoon's help in evacuating the women. Lucia reported that outside there was a battle between the Titan and some people in white who looked like they had eaten something strange. Jin Hyuk noted that Titan's defeat would be a problem and asked Lucia to intervene. Since Lucia hadn't fought bad guys in a while, she eagerly took on those in white. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk was returning, noticing on the way the same man who had already attacked him and ordered him to stop hiding. The man was amazed that he had been identified. Jin Hyuk asked him what his target was. Someone or something. The stranger only replied that he and the young man had previously had a common goal, but now everything had changed and he attacked him. But Jin Hyuk wasn't the type to be caught off guard by a sudden attack. He dodged the blow and then struck back to show his attacker that he wasn't the only one who knew how to fight. Not wanting to drag things out, he immediately took out his bat to finish the fight faster. The opponent understood that if he missed one such blow with the bat, it would all be over for him. He suddenly appeared behind Jin-hyuk and tried to stab him with a knife, but was unsuccessful. He then aimed for the throat, but Jin-hyuk managed to dodge, receiving only a slight wound. In response, the young man prepared a lightning strike to inflict decisive damage. The enemy tried to block the attack with his shield, thinking that it would help him. He managed to parry the blow with difficulty, and he was confident that he could now counterattack. But before he could collect himself, Jin-hyuk attacked again and pierced him with the bat. The young man decided to end the fight by striking him with a lightning bolt and finishing him off. Meanwhile, the Titan Guild successfully dealt with the remaining threat. At this time, Yeon-suk was thinking about who the girl was that Jin-hyuk took with him and why she was so strong. Because if it weren't for her, they would have certainly died. Meanwhile, he was also informed that all the victims had been taken to a medical facility and that they had successfully dealt with all the evidence. Yeon-suk noted that this was excellent and ordered them to not delay and take all the artifacts inside the Tyrant Guild building. At the same time, Dae-yoon ran up to them and asked them to leave immediately because the head of the Tyrant Guild, Cho Won-chol, would arrive here with his team any minute. Meanwhile, one of the members of the reconnaissance group received a warning that a group of 4 to 5 hunters, and possibly more, was approaching them. Yeon-suk realized that they could be in an extremely dangerous situation, so he ordered the others to leave immediately. He also asked Dae-yoon if he would go with them, but he replied that he would stay here to come up with an alibi. Dae-yoon explained to Yeon-suk that if he disappeared, it would arouse suspicion, so he intended to stay and give a false alibi so that everyone would think someone else was to blame. To which Yeon-suk asked him why not say that all this was done by a lone hunter named Jin-hyuk. After that, Yeon-suk and the rest of the guild members tried to get out of there as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Lucia approached Dae-yoon and suggested that they go inside, where Jin-hyuk was waiting for them. At this time, Jin-hyuk himself was trying to figure out who attacked him, and when Lucia and Dae-yoon came to him, he told them that Al-round was dead. Jin-hyuk also asked Dae-yoon for help, asking if they could pass off the attacker's body as the aftermath of the fight with the Al-round. The young man noted that he was going to blame this particular guy, because he had a notebook with the names of all his victims. Dae-yoon was extremely surprised because it turned out that in front of him was the same large guild killer who had only targeted strong organizations from the very beginning, and if he was framed as the culprit, no one would suspect deception. Dae-yoon said that he would now take control of the entire future situation and asked the guys to leave here. After all, the head of the guild will arrive here very soon with his team. Dae-yoon also thanked Jin-hyuk for helping save people from that place and assured him that there was no need to worry about him. Jin-hyuk noted that much of the credit for saving these women went to Dae-yoon and asked him to be careful and contact him as soon as it was over. Jin-hyuk himself was looking forward to learning how the Tyrant Guild would fall, as it had been dealt a powerful blow, and if others found out about it, they would definitely not stand aside. The incidents and the Tyrant Guild's secret laboratory were reported to Sang-ho, and he decided to take immediate action. Sang-ho asked Lee Hyun-woo to anonymously spread the word about the incident to the Hunters Association, the police, the media, wherever possible. He also noted that this needed to be done anonymously, so that no one would find out about their involvement, because then they would be unable to avoid a war between the guilds. And now, it was more important for them to avoid conflict than to gain immediate profit. Moreover, this was a necessary measure to prevent new casualties among the civilian population. After this, the news reported on what had happened in the secret laboratory of the Tyrant Guild, how people were used, which shocked the public and caused widespread condemnation. Sometime later, the leadership of the Tyrant Guild was detained, and the guild issued a statement promising to cooperate with the investigation. Meanwhile, Yeon-seok was furious, not understanding what Sang-ho was doing, because he literally served everything to the enemies on a golden platter, but as a result, no one ever found out about them. Afterwards, he called Sang-ho and expressed his dissatisfaction, asking what he was thinking when he sent the information anonymously. Yeon-suk stated that it was their information, obtained at great risk, but because the Ultron Guild was the first to offer help, everyone now considers them the heroes. Sang-ho explained that if the truth came out, the Tyrant Guild would destroy them before they could unite. But Yeon-suk was still dissatisfied. Yeon-suk believed that one day he would be able to recruit S-rank hunters, and then they would become the strongest. But Sang-ho did not share his opinion, saying that even then, there was no guarantee of defeating the leader of the Tyrant. Moreover, if a war breaks out between the guilds, no one knows what the damage to the people and the city will be. To this, Yeon-suk replied that if only the Tyrant was absorbed, everything else would become insignificant. However, Sang-ho stated that this was not a small matter at all, and asked why they should be a guild that did not protect the people. Yeon-suk replied that he was simply thinking about the benefit of his guild, but Sang-ho said that in fact, he was only acting in his own interests and hung up. This angered Young-suk even more, and he already wanted to smash everything around. He didn't understand why Sanho was acting like this, and noted that if he remained the guild leader with that mindset, Titan would never advance. However, Young-suk could not allow such an outcome, so he decided to resort to extreme measures and called an S-rank hunter he knew. Young-suk had previously tried to recruit him into the guild, but he refused because he wanted to become the leader. And this time, Young-suk declared that he would make him the leader. A few days later, Dae-yoon contacted Jin-hyuk and asked to meet to talk. Dae-yoon said that his lie had worked as intended, and now he felt much more comfortable in the guild. However, he also added that it was too early to relax, since it looked like the hunt for Jin-hyuk would soon begin. Jin-hyuk was surprised and asked if they would really pursue him when they were on the verge of collapse. Dae-yoon replied that, of course they would, since some of the higher-ups had already begun to suspect that everything had happened too quickly. The maniac was dead, and the information had spread instantly. That's why they assumed that the real criminal might be someone else. Dae-young noted that although they have no evidence, his identity will remain secret, but extra caution won't hurt. He also told Jin-hyuk that he would most likely be pursued by a mage and an archer who could approach him disguised as acquaintances. Dae-yoon also asked Jin-hyuk if he had heard of the monster counter and showed him an improved version created by the association to track hunters. In simple terms, soon all hunters will have to wear this counter, and then everyone will be under the control of the association. Therefore, Jin-hyuk needs to become stronger as quickly as possible, because if he does so after the implementation of the new system, it will arouse suspicion, and even the tyrant may pay attention to him. After this meeting, Jin-hyuk seriously thought about how to become stronger in such a short time, and realized that the only way was to go to the dungeon. The first thing he did was look in on the dwarf, who was furious, because he had asked for ore, and there had been no word from Jin-hyuk for several weeks. The dwarf was angry at Jin-hyuk, thinking he had died mining, and was shocked when he appeared and calmly stated that everything was fine. In addition, he brought him a rare material, but it turned out to be a cursed ore filled with evil thoughts, and dwarves are vulnerable to curses, so he did not even look at it. At that moment, Jin-hyuk understood why Lucia didn't go with him, saying that she had urgent business to attend to, and left. Realizing that the conversation had reached a dead end, Jin-hyuk tried to convince the dwarf, saying that he now understood why Lucia had said that he couldn't do it. These words offended the dwarf's honor, and he replied that in the cliff where he sent the young man, there was a place called the Dragon Temple. The dwarf gave him a key with which he could open the temple, and, once inside, try to cleanse the ore of the curse. He also added that if the young man succeeds in the task, he will make something more interesting for him than just a bat. Jin-hyuk himself didn't know what kind of temple it was and how dangerous it was, but he still went there with Lucia. Lucia told him that this was no ordinary temple. It was more dangerous than any dungeon he had been to before, and without preparation, it was easy to die there. The girl said that they should first return and gain strength, and only then go to the Dragon Temple. After that, the guys left that place, and Jin-hyuk still didn't know what awaited him ahead. After returning home, Jin-hyuk began to think about how to best prepare, and at that moment, Lee Hyun-ae called him. Lee Hyun-na asked him for immediate help, saying that if he did not intervene, Sang-ho might die. She then sent him the address, and Jin-hyuk immediately went to see her. Lee Hyun tried to help Sang-ho by bandaging his wounds, but he had already lost a lot of blood. Sang-ho was in critical condition, but even so, he assured Lee Hyun-woo that everything was fine. After some time, Jin-hyuk reached them, and the first thing he did was provide first aid to Sang-ho. He warned that it would hurt, because the situation was urgent, and he would pour the potion directly onto the open wound. The pain was unbearable, but Sang-ho held on with all his might. He then told Jin-hyuk how he was betrayed by those he considered comrades. He said that everything happened at a guild event that he attended immediately after his return. Sang-ho noted that there were only people from Young-suk's faction at the scene, and by the time he realized something was wrong, it was already too late. They added poison to the drink, which greatly weakened his body, preventing him from fighting at full strength. In the end, all he could do was run to survive, but it all ended the way it did. Jin-hyuk said it was strange, because even if he was poisoned, he could have handled it, and asked how that happened. Sang-ho wanted to answer something, but at that moment, his condition suddenly worsened, and the wound that had just been healed reopened due to the poison. Jin-hyuk offered to take him to the hunter's hospital, but he refused, saying that he would be attacked again there. Then Jin-hyuk came up with a plan, and asked Lee Hyun-woo to get ready quickly, saying that they would go to his house. On the way, they noticed a strange car, but did not pay attention to it, and headed to Jin-hyuk's house as quickly as possible. The poison continued to work, and Sang-ho became worse with each passing minute. Suddenly, Lee Hyun noticed that the same car was following them, and it seemed that they were the target of the surveillance. Jin Hyuk said that they had no choice but to fight, and told them to go wherever he said. He said that he would detain the pursuer, and in the meantime, Lee Hyun and Sang Ho would drive to the house, where Lucia would meet them. He was surprised to see that only one person got out of the car, and thought that the fight would be easy. But at that moment, Lee Hyun called him and told him to run away immediately. After all, standing in front of him was not just an assassin, but a real S-rank hunter, Kang Juntae. Despite this, Jin Hyuk did not back down and volunteered to fight him, taking out a bat from his inventory. However, when he tried to attack, the bat flew off without even hitting Juntae. Jin Hyuk realized that he was in a difficult situation and told Lee Hyun to leave immediately, promising to try to catch up with them. Juntae was not satisfied with this outcome and wanted to stop Lee Hyun-na's car. But just as he was about to pierce the car with his weapon, Jin Hyuk attacked him and distracted his attention. However, the young man posed no threat to Juntae, and he easily threw him aside. It was hard for Lee Hyun to leave Jin Hyuk alone with this monster, but she had no other choice. Although Jin Hyuk was not a worthy opponent for Juntae, he was still irritated by the fact that someone was ruining his plans, and suggested that the young man retreat peacefully. The young man replied that he was not going to go anywhere and would fight until the very end. Juntae acknowledged his determination, but at the same time noted that the young man's insolence was beginning to irritate him. After that, a real fight broke out between them, and Jin Hyuk was well aware that the difference in their strength was like heaven and earth. Juntae was superior to him in absolutely everything, and the most terrible thing was that every blow could be the last for the young man. Jin Hyuk hurried to get the chainmail from his inventory and managed to put it on before Juntae struck. It was only thanks to the armor that he remained alive. Otherwise, he would have been dead long ago. This surprised Juntae, and he asked if Jin Hyuk was the C-rank hunter who defeated the Leviathan that Yeonsuk had told him about. Juntae suggested that he forget about Sanho and join the Titan Guild, which was looking for people like him. However, Jin Hyuk replied that he had already made his choice a long time ago, and therefore was forced to refuse the offer. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun-na brought Sang-ho to Jin Hyuk's home, where Lucia was already waiting for them and immediately began treating him. Lucia explained to Lee Henna that the poison was too strong, and for now she could only ease his condition a little so that he could rest. She added that Jin Hyuk might have a way to get rid of the poison, and casually asked why he hadn't returned yet. Lee Hyun-na told her that Jin Hyuk had encountered an S-rank hunter, and Lucia was shocked by these words. Meanwhile, the battle between Jin Hyuk and Juntae was still going on. As Juntae attacked furiously, Jin Hyuk had no choice but to dodge. Juntae was several times stronger, and this was felt in every clash between them. At some point, Jin Hyuk could no longer dodge, and just 2 blows knocked him out. He realized that he had reached his limit, and even though the potion would help, he had no chance of defeating Juntae. So he decided that his only chance was to strike with one powerful blow, putting everything into it. However, in his head, everything looked simple, but in reality, it turned out to be extremely difficult. Juntae was surprised that Jin Hyuk was still standing and even trying to attack. But for Juntae, striking him was as easy as pie. He soon cornered Jin Hyuk and threw a spear at him to finish the fight. Jin Hyuk wanted to dodge, but his body didn't obey, and he only moved a little. Juntae admitted that the young man was amazing and repeated his proposal for an alliance. However, Jin Hyuk refused, saying that he did not intend to change his decision. Juntae was already sure that the fight was over, but suddenly an arrow pierced him. It could only have been Lucia, of course, who appeared at the very moment when Jin Hyuk was on the verge. Juntae was surprised that someone interfered and decided to deal with her first. But Lucia stopped his attack with one hand, which almost killed Jin Hyuk. Then she destroyed his spear, and Juntae realized that this was not just a girl in front of him. He tried to defend himself with a shield, but even that didn't help, as if there was no shield at all. Not only Juntae was amazed, but also Jin Hyuk. He could not even imagine that Lucia was so strong. Juntae was confused about who she was, whether it was possible that she was an S-rank hunter from another country. Lucia, meanwhile, asked Jin Hyuk if it was worth killing his enemy right now. He replied that it was not worth it, and suggested that Juntae end the battle there. Juntae realized that it was too risky to continue, and said he was tired, agreeing to leave. As he parted, he promised that one day they would meet again, and then both Jin Hyuk and Lucia would die. After he left, Lucia treated Jin Hyuk a little, and it turned out that the wounds were not so serious. Jin Hyuk thanked her, saying that he was feeling better and that the wound from the spear had completely healed. He noted that her fighting skills and healing abilities were simply incredible, and she looked like a cheater. Lucia didn't quite understand what he meant, so he explained that it was a compliment and then asked about Sanho. The girl replied that he was still fighting the poison and treatment was not yet possible. but perhaps the dwarf knew what to do. After that, they went to the dwarf in the dungeon to find out if there was a cure. But when they arrived, the dwarf was angry again because he was expecting a cleansing material, but instead, they brought him a poisoned man. Jin-hyuk apologized, saying that everything happened suddenly and asked for help. The dwarf replied that he could not heal him because it was basilisk venom, and the antidote required special components. Nevertheless, he agreed to help and asked for a little time to think. Sang-ho asked Jin-hyuk what this place was, and he replied that it was his ability, promising to explain everything later. After some time, the dwarf returned and brought with him a potion. At first, it seemed like it was an antidote. It turned out not to be exactly an antidote, but a potion that only temporarily slows down the effects of the poison, and if a real antidote is not found during this time, Sang-ho will die. Jin-hyuk understood the seriousness of the situation, but he didn't know what to do. Surely there would be an antidote in the Hunter Hospital, but, as Sang-ho said, the enemies would find it first. Nevertheless, the young man still found the only way to help Sang-ho. When he returned home, he told Lee-hyun everything, and also mentioned that he might know how to help Sang-ho. After which, Jin-hyuk called Chun-chol and asked if he had an antidote for the basilisk's poison, but he didn't have one. However, Chun-chol said that although he didn't have an antidote, he knew of a doctor in the shadow world who might have one. Jin-hyuk explained to Chun-chol that he had an urgent matter and asked him to connect him with the doctor as soon as possible. Chun-chol didn't ask any unnecessary questions, and also assured that everything would go quietly, since Jin-hyuk was their VIP client. Afterwards, Jin-hyuk told Lee-hyun everything, adding that a doctor who could help Sang-ho would arrive soon, which made her very happy. After some time, the doctor finally appeared and injected Sang-ho with an antidote, after which the poison was successfully removed, but the body still needed to recover. The doctor explained to Sang-ho that it would take about 2 weeks for him to fully recover, and until then, he needed strict rest. This was a real problem. 2 whole weeks until the healing, during which time Jin-hyuk would not be able to hide from the Titan Guild. Of course, the young man can count on Lucia's help, but her powers are not limitless either. Besides, Jin-hyuk is too weak right now, especially compared to Juntae, and their last meeting only proved it. Back then, he underestimated the power of the S rank and overestimated his own strength, because even if Sang-ho recovered, he would only become a burden. Meanwhile, Lucia came up to him and said that his face looked strange, as if he was lost in useless thoughts. Jin-hyuk admitted that he realized a lot after the fight with Juntae and realized how weak he is now. Lucia agreed that he is currently at a weak level, but added that this is a reason not to lose heart, but to become stronger. She also said that she had one way, although it was risky, but reliable, and Jin-hyuk, of course, was ready to take the risk. The next day, Jin-hyuk headed to the dungeon after making proper preparations. This time, the young man was about to go to the Dragon Temple, and before that, Lucia warned him about the danger. She said that she understood his desire for power at any cost, but if he became greedy, he would die. So it was worth leaving when he felt the limit. Meanwhile, Lee-hyun-ae apologized to Jin-hyuk, saying that it was all because of them, but the young man assured that it was his own choice. After which, he headed to the dungeon to the Dragon Temple, asking Lucia to take care of Sang-ho and the others. After some time, he finally reached the door of the temple that was supposed to make him stronger. As soon as he opened the door, Jin-hyuk felt a powerful aura and pressure and immediately remembered Lucia's words, "You can't be greedy." However, Jin-hyuk wouldn't be himself if he went there with the mindset of acting in moderation. As a result, he wandered around the area for a long time, but found nothing. Everything around was empty and hidden in darkness. But suddenly, everything changed. It became unusually light, and Jin-hyuk found himself in a hall with knights in armor who looked like mannequins. He thought it was a set, but as soon as he imagined it, one of the knight's eyes lit up. Moreover, the knight came to life just at the moment when Jin-hyuk had already passed by. Nevertheless, the young man managed to evade the surprise attack, but a protracted battle awaited him. Despite the number of enemies, the young man was not afraid, because he came with a clear goal: to become stronger. At first, it seemed that they were easy to deal with, but the knights had one special feature: regeneration. Before, he would have been at a loss, but now he knew how to fight enemies that could recover. Using his bat and a bolt of lightning, Jin-hyuk struck down all the enemies around him in an instant. The blow was so powerful that all the knights were defeated, but this was only the beginning. At this time, Yeon-suk was unhappy that Juntae failed the mission and was unable to kill Sang-ho. He also isolated all of Sang-ho's allies from the outside world by placing them under surveillance. Suddenly, someone burst into his office, forcibly knocking down the door. and that someone turned out to be Juntae. He was furious and demanded an explanation as to why he had not been warned about yet another obstacle. Young-suk asked why he barged in so rudely, and added that he had told him about that low-ranking hunter. However, Juntae didn't mean Jin-hyuk at all, but Lucia, since it was she who attacked him during the fight. Young-suk's assistant tried to stop him, but Juntae was too angry. At that moment, Young-suk remembered who that archer was, but he didn't expect her to be so strong. Although Juntae justified himself by saying that no one had defeated him and that he was simply unlucky, Young-suk understood that things were bad. He said that the plan needed to be revised to include the archer, but the main goal was to eliminate Sang-ho. Now Sang-ho was weaker than ever, and this was the best chance to get rid of him, and both of them understood this. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk continued to explore the temple and had already headed towards the next room. The next room was different from the previous one and seemed like the last one. Entering the room, Jin-hyuk saw an unfamiliar old man on the throne, whose karma level was 0. The old man noted that he hadn't met such brave men for a long time, and casually asked Jin-hyuk who he thought he was. The young man replied that he did not look like an ordinary person, to which the latter was angrily surprised, asking if he really thought so only because of the lack of karma. The old man seemed to read Jin-hyuk's thoughts, and even found out about the cursed item that he brought with him, asking if he had really come all this way for it. Then Jin-hyuk took out the same cursed material and said that he came here to purify it. After this, the old man touched the stone, and suddenly, real magic began to happen. The color of the mineral began to change dramatically. This spectacle was quite amazing and fascinating, and the young man did not even hide his amazement. In addition to the change in the color of the mineral, the ominous aura also completely disappeared, for which Jin-hyuk thanked the old man. However, the old man said that there was no point in thanking him yet, and it would be better to do this after he passed the test. Jin-hyuk didn't understand what was happening, why the old man suddenly started talking about some kind of test, and why everything around him started changing. After this, the young man woke up and found himself in some unknown place where complete darkness reigned. In the darkness, he felt something approaching, and looking back, he saw the knight he had met earlier. However, what interested Jin-hyuk most was where he ended up and what this strange space was. Meanwhile, the young man did not take the knight seriously, thinking that he could defeat him as easily as the others. But this knight was different from the others. Moreover, he could speak, and he told Jin-hyuk to take a stance, but he did not pay attention to this, which was a mistake. Meanwhile, several guys tried to find Jin-hyuk's house to get rid of Sang-ho, Lee-hyun, and Lucia, but they were unable to find it. Moreover, Lucia noticed the suspicious people hanging around the house in time and killed them all in an instant. Returning back, Lucia told Lee-hyun everything, and in the meantime told her not to worry about anything because she was always on the alert. Jin-hyuk continued to fight the knight at this time, and because he underestimated him, the knight instantly cut off his head. After this, the young man found himself in the temple again and was perplexed by what had happened, not understanding how he had survived if his head had been cut off. Suddenly, the old man spoke to him again, explaining that the place where he died was just an illusion, so there was no need to worry. The old man noted that the Dragon Temple was a place where one could become stronger, but it was also a testing ground, which was why he warned against letting down one's guard. And by the way, he added that strength of spirit is also a measure of power, and told Jin-hyuk to become stronger before trying again. Jin-hyuk knew he didn't have time, and asked the old man to give him a second chance, assuring him that this would never happen again. But the old man's opinion could not be changed. He declared that the young man did not understand what he was being told, and if he tried again, nothing would change. The young man did not back down either, and confidently declared that this time, he would be able to pass the test without much difficulty. His behavior made the old man laugh a little. He noted that this was the first time he had seen such a desperate guy who, even after death, did not give up. Moreover, Jin-hyuk said that if he was afraid of dying, he would not have come here at all. This made the old man laugh even more. The old man then decided to give Jin-hyuk another chance, saying that he would make an exception and allow him to try again. This time, Jin-hyuk was much more vigilant, because he understood that this was not a joke or a dream, but a real test that he had to pass. The battle between the young man and the knight began again, and at first, Jin-hyuk was completely inferior to his opponent. The difference in strength between them was noticeable, but even so, the young man did not give up and focused entirely on the battle. Jin-hyuk realized that attacking the knight head-on wouldn't work, so he had to strike and retreat, waiting for the right moment. However, everything turned out to be not so simple. The knight seemed to anticipate his every move. Jin-hyuk had already experienced this feeling in the fight with Juntae, when he also felt like he was being read. But he had no time to think, because the knight did not wait for him to think of something, but attacked without stopping. Despite the difference in strength and skill, Jin-hyuk did not give up, continuing to try to fight back. Moreover, he finally realized that the knight was reading his aura, and if he continued to use it, he would lose. So Jin-hyuk decided to change his strategy and drank a mana potion beforehand to hide his aura and confuse the enemy. However, the knight did not give them time to prepare and continued to irritate them with his attacks. Meanwhile, the knight also realized that Jin-hyuk had enveloped himself in an aura, and he didn't expect this from him. He was dissatisfied, stating that it could hardly be called his strength if he resorted to potions. Jin-hyuk replied that he didn't care whether it was his strength or not, because he would use everything he had to win. After this, the battle became even more fierce, and Jin-hyuk could only fend off the endless attacks. However, he did not give up, and tried to strike with a lightning bolt, as he had done before. At the same time, the streets near the young man's house were filled with people from the Titan Guild, and they were all looking for San-ho. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun-ye received a call from Chun-chul, who told him that the area was swarming with people from Titan, and if this continued, things would get worse by the time Sang-ho recovered. So he suggested that they meet in person and discuss how they could help. At the same time, Jin-hyuk continued to fight the knight, and his strike with a lightning charge failed. The enemy easily blocked it. Jin-hyuk was confused and didn't know what to do, because no matter how he attacked, it was all in vain. But despite all the failures and not the best situation, the young man did not give up and confidently declared that he would now put his life on the line and play for big. The knight noted that the fire in his eyes was hard to miss, and in that case, he would play along with him. He warned the young man that he was about to strike a blow that would most likely be his last, all so that he would realize the difference in strength between them. After the knight's blow, Jin-hyuk realized how strong he was, and that he was still very far from his level. But despite all the severity, he continued to hold back the blow, and was determined to decide the outcome of the battle right then and there. The young man held on until the very end, and it paid off. Suddenly, the knight's sword began to crumble. At the same time, the knight realized that Jin-hyuk had gathered all of his aura into one point in order to strengthen the blow, which is what caused this effect. The knight noted that this was commendable, but nevertheless not enough, and tried to suddenly attack the young man, but he managed to parry the blow. However, after this, Jin-hyuk had no strength left at all, and this meant only one thing: the end. The knight was quite angry with him, asking if that was all he could do, just break his wretched iron sword. In an instant, he restored part of the broken sword with the help of his aura, and was intent on finishing off the young man. As a result, Jin-hyuk found himself in a losing position. He had no strength left, no ideas on how to defeat an opponent who was many times stronger. Therefore, the young man decided to give up, declaring that he had already given it his all, and therefore had nothing to regret. Moreover, he stated that since he could not truly die in this place, he would return here until one day he would defeat it. After which the knight said that the test was over and that he had heard it loud and clear, and then asked the young man why he had decided that the essence of the test was victory. He told him that he was not only an examiner, but also a judge, and that the real purpose of the test was to earn his recognition. In conclusion, the knight only said that the young man still had much ahead of him, but nevertheless, he had passed the test. At that moment, the knight disappeared, and in his place appeared an old man. He told Jin-hyuk that he had outstanding potential, but his character needed to be corrected, because recklessness and confidence are different things. Nevertheless, his efforts are worthy of praise. Meanwhile, he also revealed to him the secret of the path to power. The old man explained that the youth's aura was based on sacred power. After this, for no apparent reason, he directed his power at the young man, leaving him confused and unable to understand what was happening. The old man only told him that he would now unite with the deity, for he had taken a liking to him, and hoped that the young man would use his gift worthily. After which, Jin-hyuk woke up again in some strange place, and again did not understand where he was. Suddenly, he saw a giant monster that looked like a dragon in front of him. However, the dragon was friendly to him. Moreover, he could speak, and explained to Jin-hyuk that he was called here to grant strength, for he was recognized as the one who is higher. That is why, from now on, he will be granted the power of the gods as the one who has passed the test. After this, something strange and incomprehensible began to happen, and Jin-hyuk did not understand what to do. But in the end, the young man accepted the divine power, and from now on, this power will accompany him. Meanwhile, Lucia had already begun to worry about Jin-hyuk, since a lot of time had passed since his departure. At that moment, she felt someone's presence and immediately ran to open the door to the room where the portal was located. She was glad that Jin-hyuk was able to cope, but what interested her most was the powerful aura emanating from the portal. When she realized that this aura was coming from Jin-hyuk, She was even more surprised and eagerly wanted to know what happened there. The girl asked him if he had really managed to complete all the trials of the Dragon Temple. Lucia's surprise knew no bounds, and in the meantime, she decided to test Jin-hyuk by suddenly attacking him. However, the young man was able to stop her attack without batting an eye, which did not please Lucia. The girl asked why he disobeyed her and what he would do if everything went wrong, because she clearly told him not to be greedy and to leave when he had enough. Jin-hyuk simply replied that he had no other choice to become stronger, so he took extreme measures. Even though Jin-hyuk had done things his own way again, and Lucia was angry at him for it, at the same time she was genuinely happy that he had managed to pass all the tests. Lucia also said that since Jin-hyuk had become so strong, he no longer needed her help, so she would go back to the dungeon. And besides, she could use a little rest. Jin-hyuk was understanding and thanked her for everything she had done for him. Lucia told him that she did not do it for free and would go to the room with the boss in order to examine the cutout circle, and in the meantime, asked Jin-hyuk to bring her a bunch of sweets. Before leaving, she also warned him that once she entered the dungeon, the perception-reducing spell would soon wear off, meaning that the ill-wishers from the Titan Guild would find his home. Jin-hyuk, after saying goodbye to Lucia, immediately went to Lee Hyun to notify her of his return, and was surprised to see Chun-chol sitting next to her. Lee Hyun was genuinely glad that the young man had returned safe and sound, and told him that Sang-ho was recovering well and that the pursuit squad had already been dealt with. She also asked him where Lucia was, and Jin-hyuk replied that she was resting for now, and then asked what Chun-chol was doing at his house. Chun-chol decided not to waste time and immediately tell Jin-hyuk everything, namely to offer to create a guild with him. He explained that if you look at the situation realistically, even if Sang-ho recovers, he will no longer be able to return to the Titan Guild, and there is a lot of evidence for this. Chun-chol also noted that the rotten organization can no longer be repaired, which means a new nest is needed. So he is going to build a new order together with Sang-ho, Lee Hyun-na, and Jin-hyuk. He also asked them to look at the materials he had prepared himself. Chun-chol provided them with a list of what he could provide to create a guild. Chun-chol found talents who could become members of the guild, but Lee Hyun-na noted that this would not be enough. Besides, even if by some miracle they manage to engage the Titans, they still need to somehow deal with Juntae, an S-rank hunter. Chun-chol noted that he had already prepared a plan for this eventuality, but in order to implement it, he needed Jin-hyuk's confirmation, and he asked the young man if he could defeat Juntae. Chun-chol explained this by saying that Sang-ho, even after recovery, would hardly be able to fight on equal terms with Juntae. And besides, he needed time to recover, which they did not have. He assured the young man that his plan would work if he could at least resist Juntae. Moreover, he stated that he was ready to bet everything on him if he defeated him. This interested the young man, so he asked to first tell him the plan in detail. Meanwhile, some members of the Titan Guild crossed the line and were beaten by the leader of the Tyrant Guild, Cho Won-chol. Won-chol didn't understand whether the Titans were fools or were so confident in their abilities that they were going straight into his guild's territory. At this time, Chun-chol told about his plan, the purpose of which was to directly drag the Tyrant Guild into this whole situation, namely to pit it against the Titan. He noted that it was a huge force, not inferior to the Titans, and even with the S-rank hunter Won-chol at the head. Lee Hyun-na reminded Jung-chol that after the Alraun incident, they were in complete chaos, and so they were unlikely to get involved in a war in this situation. Chun-chol said that this is not true, because it would be very easy to pit the Titan and the Tyrant against each other. He explained this by the fact that recently, the Titans have been actively expanding their territories, and these are mainly lands that previously belonged to the Tyrants. Jung-chol's plan was to give the Tyrants a good excuse to attack the Titans. Jin-hyuk noted that he seemed to have an idea, speaking about that very incident with the Alraun among the Tyrants, since it was they who had planted the information about it back then. Chun-chol was surprised and casually said that as soon as the Tyrants heard about this, they would immediately attack the Titans, and they, as a third force, would take advantage of this clash and strike at the top of the Titans, Yeon-suk and Juntae. Jin-hyuk liked Jung-chol's plan, so he replied that he was ready to take on the matter. Meanwhile, he suggested a name for their new guild, saying that since, according to myths, the gods of Olympus overthrew the Titans, the guild should be called Pantheon. The rest liked the name, it sounded good, and the meaning was more appropriate than ever. Chun-chol stated that in that case they would begin to act, albeit slowly, and asked Lee Hyun-woo to first convey the information to the Tyrants, and also to find out if there were any Titans who would be willing to join the Pantheon. Regarding Jin-hyuk, Chun-chol said that once the two guilds started fighting, the pursuit squads would most likely fall behind, but there was probably a way to divert their attention right now. Jin-hyuk supported Jung-chol's idea and asked Dae-yoon for help in creating illusions that would distract the pursuit squad. The young man thanked Dae-yoon, noting that he was always amazed at how believable his illusions were. Dae-yoon wanted to know from Jin-hyuk what he had mentioned earlier, or more precisely, about the rebellion within the Titan Guild, and asked what it meant. Jin-hyuk replied that it was exactly as it sounded, and explained to him that a certain Yong-seok had plotted to overthrow Sang-ho and had carried out a dirty trick. However, the young man called Dae-yoon not only to ask him to create illusions, but also to invite him to a new guild. Meanwhile, he now reported to the Tyrant Guild about what really happened in their secret laboratory, and that the Titans were behind it all, blaming them as the culprits. Wonchul stated that he couldn't just let the Titans do whatever they wanted, and ordered everyone who could be summoned to be gathered right now. Wonchul's patience ran out, and he wanted to strike the first blow against the Titans. Moreover, from this moment, they declare war on them. Suddenly, while Yeon-suk and Juntae were talking in the office, one of the guild members burst in and announced that tyrants had invaded their territory. Yeon-suk was slightly surprised and asked if they were trying to take revenge for the loss of their territories. However, this was not entirely true, because in fact, Wonchul declared war on them, and this news shocked Yeon-suk. Meanwhile, Wonchul was destroying everything in his path, and he didn't care what or who was in front of him. Juntae was shocked at what kind of useless fools their guild members really were, as they sent out a squad every day to track Wonchul's every move. Yet, it all turned out like this. Yeon-suk said that now was not the time for teasing, because at this rate, they would all die, and they needed to report this to the association immediately. The association itself was already aware of everything, and all they did was simply warn. Juntae noted that this was not surprising, since it was not the association's job to stop such fights. Moreover, this was an ideal chance for it to weaken the unruly large guilds. Yeon-suk stated that in such a case, it was necessary to change the approach and ordered that the association be contacted immediately to demand intervention, saying that civilians could die because of this war. However, in the meantime, civilians were already being asked to evacuate, and it was all because of the war between the guilds. This war was permeated with mutual hatred on both sides, and the killings were merciless. Moreover, they didn't care that small children or anyone else might get hurt. Jin-hyuk couldn't believe that such people actually existed, and hatred for them filled him. Meanwhile, he asked Lee Hyun to help evacuate people to a safer place, and also to inform all guild members that protecting civilians was the top priority. After this, Lee Hyun announced to all members of the Pantheon Guild that their top priority was to protect civilians. The creation of the new guild was also reported to Yeon-suk and Juntae, and they were surprised, as they had never heard of any Pantheon before. Juntae noted that it looked like an unknown guild was trying to take advantage of the opportunity to make a name for itself. However, he also said that it was more important for them to deal with the Tyrant Guild right now, but Yeon-suk asked him to wait. Yeon-suk noted that it seemed like the guild protecting civilians was directly connected to Sang-ho and Jin-hyuk. He told Juntae that in Greek mythology, the Pantheon was the temple of the deities who defeated the Titans. So most likely, this name was chosen to attack their guild. Juntae noted that his words did indeed make sense, and besides, the sudden appearance of such a guild looked very suspicious. At the same time, Yeon-suk received a call and was informed that Wonchul's route had finally been discovered. And right now, Wonchul was heading straight to the Titan Guild headquarters in order to end this war as quickly as possible. Juntae assured Yeon-suk that he had nothing to worry about, as he could easily defeat Wonchul. Meanwhile, the battles between the Titans and the Tyrants continued, and neither of them wanted to lose. It was a truly bloody battle, and both sides didn't care about the civilians in the city at all. They just wanted to show their power. Therefore, the new guild, Pantheon, took advantage of this opportunity to attract attention and gain respect from the civilians. At the same time, a man from the association came to Jung-chul and thanked him for his help in evacuating civilians. He noted that it was thanks to them that a major disaster was avoided. Meanwhile, he also wanted to know what kind of new guild was acting in the interests of peaceful people, and Chun-chul confidently said that their guild was called Pantheon. In fact, the association was late, so they tried to cover up the situation with empty talk, and Chun-chul understood this. Nevertheless, they achieved their goal, and now even the association sees them as a bright ray of hope for a bright future. And since Chun-chul has completed his part of the work, the rest remains solely with the guildmaster Jin-hyuk. Not long before, Jin-hyuk told the boys that the scale of the war between the two guilds would be enormous, and since the fighting was taking place in the city, civilians would definitely suffer. That's why he said then that their main priority was to protect civilians, because that way they could also create a positive image of themselves. Then Chun-chul asked him how they were going to end this war, to which Jin-hyuk only told him not to worry about it. At that time, he received a call from Dae-yoon, who informed him that Wanchol was heading straight to the Titans' headquarters. The reason he asked Dae-yoon to follow Wanchol was quite simple, because when Wanchol and Juntae came face to face, they could easily destroy part of the city, and that was something Jin-hyuk wanted to avoid. Lee Hyuna was surprised by how confident Jin-hyuk was in his abilities, and that he wanted to kill 2 S-rank hunters at once. Jin-hyuk assured the boys that he would take care of Juntae and Wanchol, and asked them to focus on ensuring the safety of civilians. Meanwhile, Wanchol had already arrived at the Titans' headquarters and was eagerly waiting to meet Juntae. Of course, there were security guards at the entrance who tried to stop Wanchol, but it was in vain. With Wanchol already at the main gate, it was time for Juntae to make his entrance, and for the final battle between the guilds to begin. Until Juntae showed up, the Titan Guild members tried to resist Wanchol, but it was no use. Wanchol easily killed all the Titans around him, and at that moment, Juntae finally came out to him. Juntae wanted to suddenly pierce him with a spear, but such a trick neither hurt nor frightened Wanchol. And quickly realizing this, Juntae instantly grabbed Wanchol by the clothes and threw him away. Moreover, he declared that he was now the guild master of the Titan Guild, which made Wanchol confused and wanted to know what happened to Sang-ho. However, in response to his question, Juntae replied that he did not know, only saying that Wanchol would certainly be able to communicate with him in the afterlife. These words made Wanchol laugh a lot, and he declared that the only one who would go to the next world today was himself. At the same time, Yongsuk ran out of the headquarters and was surprised to see that Wanchol had killed all of his guildmates in the area. Yongsuk wanted to order the other guys from the guild to come to his aid immediately, but it was impossible because they were all currently fighting against the tyrants. At that very moment, Yongsuk understood everything. Wanchol's main task was to ensure that all the troops were distributed in different places so that he could easily attack the main base alone. But whether his plan worked or not will only be revealed by the results of his battle with Juntae. Meanwhile, Lucia continued to study the drawings she found on the ceiling of the boss's room, and even after several days, she still hadn't managed to find out anything. This was because there were quite a few things she didn't understand, but if she could decipher this magic circle, she would be able to return to her world. Meanwhile, after spending several days in the dungeon, Lucia became very hungry and decided to take a short break, returning to the surface in order to have a snack of sweets, since there would be none in her world. Meanwhile, the battle between the 2 S-rank hunters, on which the further outcome of the war essentially depended, continued. And as Jin-hyuk said, this battle could destroy most of the city because both of them have no control over their power. Luckily, Jin-hyuk arrives just in time for their battle, and the young man was filled with hatred towards the 2 of them for not valuing the civilians and the city. Previously, he wouldn't have even dared to approach them or say anything unnecessary, but now he is able to stand up to S-rank hunters. It was as if it were a battle between 2 monsters who forgot all norms and boundaries, and their goal was only to destroy their opponent. Wanchol, meanwhile, was amazed at how strong Juntae was, exceeding all his expectations. And just as both of them were focused on the battle, Jin-hyuk appeared and suddenly attacked them. This surprised both Wanchol and Juntae, and the latter was especially shocked because only a couple of days had passed since their last meeting, and the young man was already acting so arrogantly. Wanchol was more surprised by the aura emanating from the young man, which did not resemble an A rank. It was more powerful and could be equated to an S rank. Jin-hyuk himself felt nothing but hatred towards Wanchol for the fact that he carried out an experiment with the all-round elixir and sacrificed countless women. Meanwhile, the young man asked them if they really considered themselves hunters and suggested that they look around. He noted that it was because of them that the city was now in ruins. Innocent people were seriously injured, and some even died. Jin-hyuk just wanted to ask Juntae and Wanchol if, after seeing all this, they didn't feel at least a little guilty for what they had done. However, Juntae just laughed, saying that the lives of civilians were the same as the lives of a simple insect that he could crush during an ordinary walk. After his words, Jin-hyuk was convinced that Juntae and Wanchol considered themselves to be on top of the world and did not care about anyone or anything. Jin-hyuk stated that in that case, he would get rid of the 2 of them and make this world a little better. Such a harsh and arrogant statement made Juntae laugh and at the same time surprised him, which made him want to show the young man how wrong he was. Juntae also asked Wanchol not to interfere while he dealt with the upstart, and then they would continue fighting among themselves. Wanchol replied that he didn't mind waiting, saying that it looked like it would be quite an interesting show, and that it would also increase his chances of winning. Jin-hyuk, meanwhile, declared that he wouldn't mind fighting both of them at once, which angered Juntae even more. Then Juntae rushed at the young man and wanted to finish him off with one blow of his spear. However, everything was not at all as Juntae had imagined, and it was a great surprise to him that the young man was able to stop his attack in an instant. Juntae didn't understand what was happening and how Jin Hyuk was able to block his attack, when just a few days ago he couldn't even touch him. Moreover, the young man not only could defend himself without difficulty, he also counterattacked skillfully, which was even more surprising. What was even more surprising was that Jin Hyuk was able to push Juntae away even after he blocked his punch. The young man wanted to deliver the finishing blow with his bat, striking with a bolt of lightning, but at the last moment, Juntae managed to dodge. Juntae thought that he would be able to deal significant damage to Jin Hyuk now, but he only managed to throw him away. He also said that he regretted not killing him last time, and even though he was stronger now, he would easily kill him. Jin Hyuk declared that today everything would be different, because then he ran away, promising himself to become stronger and kill the one who humiliated him. Juntae didn't expect such a mood and realized that it seemed that fighting the young man would cause him problems. Juntae asked him if he had taken that same forbidden all-round elixir and had become stronger thanks to it. Wanchul then intervened, asking Juntae what he meant by all-round, to which Juntae replied that it was Jin Hyuk who killed the all-round, took the elixir, and apparently used it on himself. This angered Wanchul, and he wanted to hear the boy's explanation of what Juntae had just said. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk took out an object from his pocket and asked Wanchul if he really meant this when he spoke of Alroni. After which, Wanchul lost his temper and immediately rushed to Jin Hyuk to take the so-called elixir from him. Wanchul was confident in his strength and that he could easily strike Jin Hyuk, but he easily dodged the attack. He tried to attack him again at the moment when he turned around, but this was also in vain, for the young man instantly jumped high into the air. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk noticed himself being filmed by a news drone, and immediately afterward, the news reported that another S-rank hunter, whose identity has not yet been established, had appeared in the middle of the battle between the two S-rank hunters. Meanwhile, the fight between Jin Hyuk and Wanchul continued, and the young man not only dodged his opponent's blows, but also successfully counterattacked. Juntae, who was watching everything from the side, did not understand what was happening, and how Jin Hyuk was able to gain strength so quickly to resist Wanchul. Moreover, the young man was not only at a level that allowed him to fight on equal terms, but seemed to be even stronger than him. Wanchul was not happy with the outcome of the fight, so he told Juntae in advance not to interfere and to let him deal with this upstart himself. After that, something strange started to happen, as if Wanchul had awakened his second wind. Now he was confident that he would finally be able to deliver, if not a final, then certainly a strong and powerful blow to Jin Hyuk. However, this did not happen, and the young man not only easily dodged all attacks, but also easily counterattacked him. Wanchul didn't expect the fight to go exactly like this, and that the young man would be able to inflict significant damage on him with just his bare fist. Jin Hyuk then hit him with his bat, and only at the last moment did Wanchul barely manage to block the blow. Seeing how the tide of the battle had changed dramatically, Juntae decided not to stand aside and join Wanchul. But at the moment when he wanted to suddenly attack the young man from behind, he blocked his spear with a bat, and, what's more, destroyed it. This surprised Juntae even more, and he completely stopped understanding what was happening. It seemed as if the person in front of him was not just an S-rank hunter, but a robber attacking from behind. As a result, neither Juntae nor Wanchul were able to stand up to Jin Hyuk alone. Meanwhile, Wanchul proposed to Juntae to form a temporary alliance and kick the impudent youth's ass together. Juntae immediately agreed, realizing that he had no other choice, and he did not intend to lose. They were both certain that no matter how strong Jin Hyuk was, he would definitely not be able to deal with two S-rank hunters at once. At the same time, it was announced that while the war between the major guilds continued, the identities of Wanchul and Juntae had been revealed, but the identity of the third hunter was still being clarified. Meanwhile, many were wondering why there was still no news from the Titans guildmaster San-ho. Meanwhile, San-ho had finally recovered from the poison and was already preparing to be born. The first thing he did was call Lee Hyun and ask what was going on, and she told him about the war between the guilds. She also told him that Jin Hyuk had created a new guild, Pantheon, which she was now a member of. Sang-ho was at a loss as to what was going on and wanted to contact Jin Hyuk directly to hear everything from him. But Lee Hyun said that this was impossible, because right now the young man was in the middle of a fight between two S-rank hunters. This didn't just surprise San-ho, but stunned him, and he didn't understand how the young man could fight with Juntae and Wanchul. Sang-ho understood that Jin Hyuk was strong, but his strength was unlikely to be enough to fight such monsters, and he wanted to go to him. However, Lee Hyun asked him not to be nervous and to rest for now, since he had only just returned to normal. But San-ho replied that he couldn't just sit on the sidelines, since all of this started because of him. Lee Hyun realized that it would be useless to convince him not to interfere, so she agreed to send him the location of the battle. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk was fighting two S-rank hunters at once, and despite their strength, he was not inferior to them. Moreover, the young man seemed to read all their movements and could both block attacks and respond to them. Of course, Juntae and Wonchul thought that they could easily defeat him if they attacked together. However, their plan failed, and when Wonchul wanted to attack Jin Hyuk from behind, he managed to dodge, and as a result, Wonchul collided with Juntae. Realizing that the fight would be much more difficult than it seemed at first glance, Juntae decided to drink a mana potion. Meanwhile, Wonchul tried to stop Jin Hyuk and somehow hit him, but the young man blocked his attacks with his bare hand. Moreover, it seemed to him as if it was not a young man standing in front of him, but a real demon. And the moment he lost his guard, he was immediately hit in the face with a bat, after which Wonchul found himself on the floor and could not get up, while Juntae, meanwhile, began to worry and already doubted that they would be able to defeat the young man. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk told Wonchul that today was the day he would pay for everything he had done, from kidnapping innocent women to experimenting on his own people from the guild. However, Wonchul asked him if he really wanted to kill him for such a crazy reason, saying that if he wanted his place in the guild, he was willing to give it up if he spared him. But Jin Hyuk said that he had already decided everything, and then pierced Wonchul's body with his bat, thereby putting a firm and confident end to his life. Watching this, Juntae couldn't believe that all this was actually happening and didn't know what to do. Juntae wanted to hit him from behind, but at the same time he was tormented by doubts and the question of what would happen to him after he tried to strike. That's why he couldn't think of anything better to do than just run away, at least to save his life. However, Jin Hyuk did not want to let him go and intended to do the same to him as he did to Wonchul, after which his bat flew at Juntae, but he was able to block it. But all this was only to distract him for a moment. Meanwhile, Sanho and Lee Hyun arrived at the scene of the battle, not yet knowing that the young man had already killed two hunters. Lee Hyun tried to dissuade Sangho, but he firmly stated that he could not leave everything to the young man, and that he was the one who had to finish this fight. Young Seok watched from the side as Jin Hyuk mercilessly beat and killed Wonchul, and now beats Juntae as well. He was also confused and didn't understand what was going on. How two S-rank hunters could lose to one boy. Young-suk realized that his plan had failed, and now he needed to think everything over again. And to do this, he needed to lie low for a while. However, another of his plans was about to fail, because before Sangho left, Lee Hyun-na told him that she had seen someone on the roof of a building near the epicenter of the battle using a drone. When Yeon-suk saw Sangho in front of him, he couldn't believe his eyes. Sanho came to him to take revenge for the betrayal and everything he did against him. Young-suk also confessed to him that he wanted to get rid of him because he didn't think he was useful to the guild. Sangho denied his words, saying that he was just trying to justify his actions to the guild after causing trouble out of greed. However, Yeon-suk considered himself a hero for the guild, and at the same time decided to attack Sanho. More precisely, he allegedly attacked Sanho in order to weaken his guard and buy time to escape. But he didn't even succeed in this, and Sanho, having caught up with him, pierced his head with his weapon. And with this, Young-seok's life was cut short. At the same time, Jin Hyuk and Juntae were fighting in full force. Or rather, the young man was mercilessly beating his opponent. And as a result, Juntae was already on his knees, as Jin Hyuk's last blow made it hard for him to breathe. Nevertheless, he tried to persuade the young man to spare him at least this time. Juntae assured him that if he allowed him to live, he would give him everything, including the guild. To which Jin Hyuk asked him if he remembered the time when they first fought, and asked if he had asked him for mercy back then. The young man noted that he had fought to the very end back then, so he told Juntae that if he wanted to survive, he also needed to fight to the very end. After these words, Jin Hyuk delivered the finishing blow, and Juntae was finished. This battle marked the end of the war between the two guilds, and what would happen next after the death of the two S-rank hunters who were their leaders remained to be seen. The young man felt a great sense of relief and pride in himself. And in the meantime, Sanho came to him. He asked him if everything was okay with him, and also what had actually happened there. But the young man only replied that he would explain everything later, since now they had more important matters to attend to, namely, the damage done to the city. However, Sangho said that he had nothing to worry about. He and Lee Hyun-na would take care of that part. Meanwhile, there was something much more important. Lee Hyun received a letter from the association, stating that Jin Hyuk was being summoned. Surprised by this news, Jin Hyuk immediately went to the headquarters of the Hunters Association, where the first thing they did was conduct a certain test for him, the main goal of which was to survive. Dozens of drones attacked him at once, and all the young man could do was dodge them. However, this quickly became boring for him, so he decided not to just dodge, but to attack the drones himself. As a result, Jin-hyuk passed the surprise test with ease and set a new record in the process. The young man was told that this test was an official procedure of the association to accurately determine the rank of hunters, because due to the fact that he defeated 2 S ranks at once, the association no longer considered him a C rank. However, Jin-hyuk didn't quite understand what they wanted from him, saying that he didn't see the connection with this stupid test. Moreover, the young man stated that he was leaving and did not wish to have any further connection with the association. They tried to stop Jin-hyuk, saying that they wanted to conduct another test, but the young man said that he was not interested. But Jin-hyuk didn't care what the association wanted from him and that he couldn't leave the room, so he decided to leave. However, on the way, he was met by a couple more guys from the association who wanted to stop him, despite the fact that they knew what he was capable of. Seeing that the guys didn't want to attack first, Jin-hyuk decided to strike first. But at that moment, the chairman appeared and asked him to stop. The chairman of the Hunters Association, No Taek-soo, apologized for the inconvenience and asked Jin-hyuk for a moment of his attention. Jin-hyuk asked Taek-soo why someone like him would summon a mere C-rank hunter like him. Taek-soo apologized again, saying that it wasn't actually him who wanted to see him, but someone else. That someone was South Korea's strongest hunter, Jong Sang-ho. The young man was surprised that a person like Jong Sang-ho wanted to meet him in person, and he didn't even know how to react. Jong Sang-ho noted that he saw footage of his last battle, saying that his skills were incredibly outstanding, which is why he wanted to meet him in person. However, he wanted to meet him not only because of this. He also had one request for the young man. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun-na reported to Sang-ho that the Titan and Tyrant guilds had successfully merged with the Pantheon Guild and were now acting together. Lee Hyun-na also apologized, saying that she wanted to protect Titan, but Sang-ho replied that it was not necessary, as disbanding the guild was the best decision. Meanwhile, Sang-ho was thinking about retiring, but Lee Hyun stopped him, saying that they would find a place for him in Pantheon, and besides, she had already joined them. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk went one-on-one against South Korea's best hunter, at his own request. The thing is that when Jong Sang-ho saw Jin-hyuk fight, he recognized in him someone who could become his comrade, with whom he would fight side by side, or a worthy opponent. The young man told him that he did not quite understand the reason why he wanted to fight him, but he was not one to back down from a challenge. Jong Sang-ho was even more pleased with this attitude, and was already looking forward to fighting the young man. Jin-hyuk didn't care who was in front of him, because he had gone through hell that many could never even dream of. Lee Hyun-na was also informed that Jin-hyuk was going to fight Jong Sang-ho, and she, in turn, told Sang-ho about it. Sang-ho was extremely surprised by this news, and suggested that Lee Hyun go to the association right away, as the young man could be in danger. The battle between the outstanding newcomer and South Korea's best hunter began, and it seemed that the two were on par with each other in strength. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk decided not to drag out the fight, saying that he understood the difference in strength between them, so he wanted to give it his all from the very beginning. Jong Sang-ho was surprised and at the same time glad that the young man immediately decided to fight to the fullest. He decided that in this case he would not give in to him either, and instantly cut through the young man's aura. Immediately after this, Jong Sang-ho attacked him, which Jin-hyuk did not expect, but managed to block the blow. At that moment, the young man realized the difference between the hunters he had fought and Jong Sang-ho. In comparison, he looked real. Nevertheless, such a fight was a good chance for the young man to test what his limits really were. However, Jin-hyuk suddenly declared that he had lost, as his sword had been destroyed after the last skirmish. It was a very unexpected outcome, and yet Taek-soo announced that Jin-hyuk would now become an S-rank hunter. As a result, everything ended in a way no one expected. Moreover, Jong Sang-ho even agreed to give an interview in which he confirmed the words that he lost to the young man. Meanwhile, Jin-hyuk asked him to fight seriously next time, as he was sure that the sword he fought with was not actually his main weapon. Be that as it may, the young man drew his own conclusions and realized that at this stage, he was not yet strong enough. At that moment, Lee Hyun and Sang-ho arrived to see him, worried about what was happening. Jin-hyuk noted that everything was fine and there was no reason to worry, and that sparring with Jong Sang-ho had taught him a lot. Moreover, during the battle with him, he felt the same pressure as in the Dragon Temple. Nevertheless, the young man suggested returning to the guild and talking about everything there. After all this, Jin-hyuk was finally able to return home and breathe a sigh of relief for the first time in a long time. Meanwhile, he also received a call from Chun-chul, who was worried about the recent situation, but the young man assured him that everything was fine. Chun-chul also reported to him about the state of affairs with the guild management, and that so far, everything was going without problems, as well as that they had managed to seize the assets of the Titans and Tyrants. Moreover, they managed to open up the hunting grounds, which made hunters more active and helped prevent invasions from other guilds. Jin-hyuk thanked him for the work he had done and said that he would definitely visit them in the near future. The young man was already eager to go and rest, but even while he was resting, he still had things to do, so he would soon have to go to the dungeon again. Of course, he couldn't come to the dungeon without visiting the dwarf, and he wanted to ask him to strengthen his weapon. The dwarf was quite outraged by the young man's request, because he had once again disappeared for a long time and returned with another request to help him become stronger. Jin-hyuk tried to justify himself by saying that he didn't just ignore his orders. In fact, he had his reasons, and he told him everything. After this, the dwarf became furious, for he was surprised that the young man had lost even with such a weapon, and said that in that case, he would strengthen it again. Jin-hyuk thanked him and left, but in the meantime, he wondered where Lucia was now, since a lot of time had passed since their last meeting. However, when he decided to visit the boss's room to see if Lucia was there, he slightly frightened her, causing her to attack him with her fists. Lucia told him that she had been here all this time because this magic circle was her only hope of returning to her world. She noted that she seemed to be making progress in this matter. She tried to use a dimensional magic spell as a test, and although she did everything correctly, nothing happened. However, Lucia had no idea that the spell had actually worked. And right now, something was happening in Jin-hyuk's kitchen. Back on the surface, Jin-hyuk went to the store to buy sweets for Lucia. Meanwhile, the saleswoman at the store recognized him and called the young man a real god, asking to take a photo as a souvenir. But Jin-hyuk apologized, said that he didn't have time for that now, and ran away. After that, he went back to the dungeon and went to the dwarf to find out how things were going with his new weapon. The dwarf had just finished upgrading by that time, and said that his weapon was now on a completely different level. Taking his new bat in his hands, Jin-hyuk was quite surprised because the weapon was now absorbing his mana, which made him worry. The young man thought that the dwarf had made a mistake and done something wrong, but he declared that there were no mistakes, because this time he had used Alrauni ore for improvement. He noted that monster ore usually carries the traits of the monster itself, and the Alraun is initially used to absorb life force. However, due to the refinement of this ore, its nature has changed, and it now absorbs the mana of the host. The dwarf noted that he had nothing to worry about, because if the bat absorbed mana, it meant that the ore's ability had worked successfully. And besides, not all the mana would be absorbed, but only the required amount. After this, Jin-hyuk went out to a more open area to test his bat. Now confident that everything would go as planned, the young man used his weapon to destroy the target in front of him. The power of the weapon was so incredible that he could easily cut through the stone statue as if with a blade. The dwarf, meanwhile, was surprised at how the young man grew with each of their meetings, as if gaining strength not by years, but by days. He also asked the young man where he was going today, and he replied that he wanted to visit Lucia. The dwarf wasn't very happy that the young man wanted to meet that same long-eared semblance of a human, and then Jin-hyuk asked what had happened between them, to which the dwarf merely replied that it was a very long story, so now they simply tolerated each other because it was necessary. But he explained that the dwarves and elves had been sworn enemies since time immemorial, since it was the elves who sold their people to the dragons. From that moment on, Jin-hyuk finally understood why the dwarf so openly hated Lucia, and after talking with him, he went to see her. Lucia decided to change location and headed to the temple, leaving a note for Jin-hyuk beforehand so that he would know where to look for her. The young man was surprised and did not understand why she suddenly decided to visit the temple instead of continuing to explore the magic circle, to which Lucia asked him to look around. She noted that the entrance to the temple, which was here recently, suddenly disappeared, and she thinks that this happened just after he passed the tests. In addition, after that, the teleportation magic circle also changed. During her research, she also found out that this was something more advanced than just a magic circle, and asked Jin-hyuk if he knew anything about the magician who pulled this off. Meanwhile, Lucia also asked the young man if he would like to learn magic directly from her. To be more precise, Lucia wanted Jin-hyuk to learn magic to help her, because there was one spell that couldn't be used alone. Lucia explained that activating a magic circle required a huge amount of mana, and that her own mana alone was not enough. Moreover, she was not sure whether the boy had enough mana. Jin-hyuk pointed out that in that case, they could try something and took out his bat. But Lucia didn't quite understand what he wanted to do. The young man told her that his bat now emits mana thanks to a new improvement from the dwarf, and now he can store mana directly in the bat and use it. However, he was unsure if they could use that mana for the spell, and Lucia decided to test it, but when she touched the bat, the weapon pushed her away. Lucia didn't understand what had happened and why she couldn't even touch the bat. And at that moment, Jin-hyuk remembered the dwarf's words that only he could use this weapon, to which the girl replied that this was not surprising, since everything could not have gone so smoothly, and in that case, the young man would have to learn magic. From that day on, Jin-hyuk began learning magic from Lucia, a process that turned out to be extremely difficult for him. He had to memorize a huge amount of magical knowledge, as well as learn to control the flow of mana. On top of all this, he had to learn how to activate magic circles using all the knowledge he had gained. And as a result of long and diligent training, he was finally able to understand the theory of magic, and he was able to apply it. Lucia was happy for Jin-hyuk, but this was only the basics before they could begin the main task. Using her research notes on the magic circle in the boss room, Lucia finally began to understand what was going on. She asked Jin-hyuk if he remembered what she had mentioned earlier, that the magic of teleportation between spaces required a huge amount of mana. Lucia noted that the wizard most likely altered the circle to handle all that mana on his own, and as a result, he managed to carry out the teleportation, but something went wrong, because the portal connected to the dungeon turned out to be somehow connected to the young man's room. She also said that there was little point in studying this failed magic circle further, but they had a perfect magic circle engraved in the Dragon Temple. Therefore, if they compare and analyze them, they will certainly be able to recreate something similar. From that day on, Jin-hyuk and Lucia continued their research on how to create the perfect magic circle. It took them a considerable amount of time, but nevertheless, it was not in vain. As a result, they managed to create something similar and use the bat as a source of mana. The next step was to introduce this very mana directly into the circle itself in order to activate it. And when there was enough mana, Lucia would report it. After Jin-hyuk stuck the bat into the magic circle and began pouring mana into it, something started to happen. The magic circle began to react to mana, which was good news. Jin-hyuk wanted to release all the mana he needed, but suddenly something went wrong, and instead of mana, his aura began to flow into the circle. Neither Jin-hyuk nor Lucia understood what had happened, and meanwhile, the elf saw how the floor under the circle began to crack. Lucia immediately moved away from the magic circle, suspecting something strange, and told Jin-hyuk to slowly get out of there. In an instant, an explosion occurred on the spot, as if an unknown beam had pierced it. As a result, the part of the floor where the magic circle was located was destroyed, causing Lucia to become angry. She was furious because she believed that all this happened because of Jin-hyuk. After another failure, the guys went to the surface, and while Jin-hyuk blamed himself for everything, Lucia continued to eat sweets. Jin-hyuk remarked that he never thought that the mana stored in the bit would leak out as an aura, but Lucia considered these to be mere excuses. The young man was angry with himself because he believed that it was his fault that Lucia was stuck in his world and could not return to her home. Jin-hyuk noted that he would try to find a new way to help her return home, and also said that if she needed any help, he was always ready to help. An angry Lucia only answered him that if he wanted to help her somehow, he should bring even more sweets. The young man offered her a cake that he just happened to have in the refrigerator, and Lucia, of course, didn't mind. However, as soon as Jin-hyuk opened the refrigerator, he felt something strange, as if an ominous cold was coming from the refrigerator, penetrating to the very bones. Meanwhile, Lucia continued to eat sweets and did not understand why the young man had suddenly become so worried. As a result, by some unknown miracle, Jin-hyuk's refrigerator door turned into a door between his house and the snowy mountain. Lucia was surprised and said that it seemed the magic circle was not broken, but was actually quite functional, which is why his refrigerator is now a portal to another world. Moreover, the elf felt mana emanating from the portal, which was similar to the one that was in her world. And of course, to make sure that this was really the dimension Lucia came from, the guys went to explore it. But before that, the young man wanted to do something. He called Chun-chul and Lee Hyun-woo to his home and warned them that he wanted to take a break from the guild's affairs for a while, explaining that he wanted to devote all his free time to training. Chun-chul noted that in this case, no problems would arise, and if something did happen, they would be able to solve the problem without his participation. Chun-chul himself wanted to make the Pantheon Guild #1 in influence in Korea during the time Jin-hyuk would be training. Meanwhile, Lucia and Jin-hyuk were already preparing to set off on their journey. And before that, the young man gave the elf new arrows that the dwarf had asked him to give. Although the dwarf seemed hostile towards the elf, he still cared about both her and the young man. Lucia did not consider the gift of arrows to be a big deal, but she was very surprised when she realized that the arrowhead was of the highest rank. Armed and prepared, the boys finally set off for another dimension. Inside, the new dimension truly felt completely different, and Jin-hyuk was already eager to find out what interesting things he could find. As a result, they wandered into some kind of ice cave, and although the surroundings were quite beautiful and mesmerizing, there was also danger. Lucia warned Jin-hyuk that something was approaching them right now, so they needed to be extremely vigilant. And her feeling did not fail her. Suddenly, they were attacked by a couple of bloodthirsty snow monsters. However, no matter what kind of monster was in front of them, it did not frighten them in the least, because both Jin-hyuk and Lucia were confident in their abilities. As a result, dealing with the two monsters that suddenly appeared was not difficult at all. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, something began to happen, and the Elder was notified that a certain apostle had crossed the dimensional boundary. The apostle was none other than Jin-hyuk, who was destined to become the one who would destroy the world. After killing the monster, Jin-hyuk immediately placed it in his inventory, and thus learned that the snow monster was called Yeti. Lucia told Jin-hyuk that Yetis were a type of monster that roamed the snowy mountains in packs, and in that case, they would be better off leaving as soon as possible. After all, if you provoke even one Yeti, a whole pack will come to its aid in order to kill the offender. In fact, it would not have been difficult for Jin-hyuk and Lucia to fight the Yetis and kill them all. The main problem was the ice cave. Such a place is too fragile and can collapse right during the fight. Meanwhile, the young man found a way to stop the Yeti and took a blinding grenade from his inventory. But suddenly, the Yetis began to retreat, as if they were afraid of them. Lucia noted that she felt a strange mana, and most likely, there was something nearby that even the Yetis were afraid of. However, the elf didn't know what exactly it could be, and so Jin-hyuk suggested going there to find out what it was. As they walked further, they came across an open area, and without thinking twice, Jin-hyuk went to explore further. Lucia suspected something was wrong, for she had never felt such ominous mana before. As they wandered around, they came across a strange building from which this mana was coming, and Lucia felt uneasy being near it. Lucia noted that the mana emanating from this building was extremely strange and ominous, so they needed to be extremely careful. Meanwhile, a certain god of the other world named Ordo finally found the young man and wanted to surprise him with his appearance, so that he would remember their meeting. At this time, the guys came closer to the building and saw someone there that looked like a human. But Lucia warned Jin-hyuk that the person in front of them was not a human at all. She noted that there was a strange mana emanating from him that she had not felt before. Meanwhile, an unknown and strange guy spoke to them, asking if it was they who sent them here. Jin-hyuk replied that they didn't know about any them. They were here because they were conducting an investigation and felt an ominous mana, and asked who he was. Hearing this, the guy turned aggressively against them, and calling them foreigners, wanted to kill them for seeing this place. It was a great surprise for the young man to realize that the guy in front of them was not human at all. In fact, it was a real dragon who wanted to kill them for daring to enter sacred land without an invitation. But what was even stranger was that during its attack, the dragon suddenly stopped. Moreover, another unknown man appeared next to the dragon and greeted the guys. Somehow, he managed to stop time to speak directly to Jin-hyuk. Jin-hyuk wanted to know first who he was, and he approved his question. However, since the young man was appointed his apostle, he gave his name, Ordo. Ordo also said that he is the creator of the dragon that attacked them. His name is Tiamat, and he is the god of the world he lives in. Ordo noted that it did not matter whether the young man believed him or not, for the fact that he was God was true, and he had been observing people for a long time. When Ordo said he had been watching them for a long time, he meant he had been watching them since the dawn of the human species. And every moment that humanity lived, all this time, he was watching them. Ordo admitted that he likes the way people live. It's interesting to watch them. However, he was greatly upset when people began to divide, hate each other, and fight among themselves, killing one after another. Moreover, because of this very war, they almost destroyed the world that was so dear to him. Ordo noted that if humanity were left unattended, they would soon kill each other, and he did not want that to happen. So he, as their new god, decided that it was necessary to create a common enemy so that people would reunite and act together. And so he created those very monsters. And so that people could resist these very monsters, Ordo created hunters. At first, it seemed to him that everything was going as it should. Monsters became a common enemy for people, and they united to kill a common enemy. However, this did not last long, and after some time, people again began to feud among themselves, using the power of hunters. He also mentioned that Jin-hyuk was no different from them, because as soon as he gained power, he immediately used it against those he hated. Ordo also said that the young man was originally destined to become his apostle, and he was not supposed to become so strong, but everything changed when that very anomalous portal appeared. The dungeon that eventually made the young man so strong also destroyed everything. And it was precisely because of that very wizard who started it all and placed a portal to the dungeon in the young man's room that Jin Hyuk became stronger much earlier than expected. Moreover, the situation worsened even more when Jin Hyuk found the Dragon Temple dungeon, where the dragon god himself was located. Ordo himself tried to destroy the temple before the young man entered it, but he failed because of the dragon god. And perhaps it was precisely because of the influence of the dungeon that he could not find the young man all this time. However, his presence has recently disappeared completely, allowing the Ordo to finally find the young man he appointed as his apostle, whose true purpose is to end all conflicts and become the guardian of humanity. Jin Hyuk was destined to become the protector of the world, who stands at the top of everything. Therefore, Ordo tried to convince the young man to join him, and if he refused, he would face immediate death. Jin Hyuk noted that the offer was quite tempting, and all he needed to do was listen to Ordo's commands to become the strongest. The young man said that he had previously dreamed of such a life, but now everything had changed, and he was forced to refuse the offer. He also said that Ordo didn't really need an assistant. He needed a puppet he could control. Ordo was disappointed in the young man, and said that even after sharing his deep intentions with him, he still did not understand anything. So Ordo stated that they would solve this issue in a different way, and pointed to his dragon Tiamat, saying that it was a powerful monster that he personally modified after capturing an ancient dragon from another world. Ordo noted that he hated everything in the dungeon that appeared in the young man's room, but still found something in it that he liked, and this allowed him to cross dimensions and create Tiamat. Moreover, he declared that every hunter and monster would be destroyed by Tiamat, and then, in a world where all sources of conflict had disappeared, only his chosen new humanity would remain, who loved peace. And the young man who refused to become a submissive apostle of the Ordo will become Tiamat's first victim. Jin Hyuk stated that in that case, he would fight to the last and ultimately become the one to kill Tiamat himself. Ordo noted that the young man was moving forward even in the face of death. His courage was admirable and truly befitting the man he had once chosen. But today, it would all end. Meanwhile, the dwarf finished making a new set of armor for the young man, since the old one was already due for replacement. And in the meantime, he recalled the day when they first met. Then he couldn't even imagine that everything would turn out this way, and that this meeting would turn into a real friendship. Of course, he wasn't very happy that one day he brought an elf with him, and then they both came to his workshop and made noise. But this also made him happy. He looked forward to what the young man would bring next, thinking that one day he would still bring him the body of a dragon or something like that. Meanwhile, Jin Hyuk fought the dragon, and soon after, Lucia finally came to her senses. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. The dragon suddenly ate the young man, and it seemed that he was about to swallow him. However, the young man could not die such a stupid death, after everything he had to endure. Ordo noted that the spectacle was quite amusing, but nevertheless, today it would only end in despair for them. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun received a call from Chun Chol, and the reason he suddenly contacted her was because of a summons from the association. Chun Chol explained that new gates had begun appearing all over Seoul, including those in the 9th region under their guild's control, and the association was asking them to look into it. Sang-ho was very surprised to hear this, saying that the 9th region was located near Jin Hyuk's house. Meanwhile, the young man was fighting the dragon, and things were not going well for him, to put it mildly. Lucia decided not to stand aside and help Jin Hyuk, trying to at least weaken the dragon with her arrows. She shot straight into his throat, allowing Jin Hyuk to escape the monster's jaws. This also infuriated Tiamat, and he wanted not only to kill the young man, but to turn him into ashes. Moreover, he managed to reach Lucia with his tail, and due to his insane speed, she didn't even have time to react. As a result, the dragon still struck her, and Jin Hyuk was forced to fight it one-on-one. After this, Jin Hyuk realized that there was no point in holding back any longer, and that he needed to finish him off as soon as possible. Tiamat tried to crush the young man, but he managed to hold back the blow, which greatly surprised the dragon. The young man not only repelled his attack, but also awakened a hidden power within himself, which left Tiamat and Ordo at a loss. Ordo didn't understand how this could have happened, because something like this shouldn't have happened here. It turned out that Jin Hyuk's hidden power was the true power of a dragon. Meanwhile, the dragon god sensed that Jin Hyuk had finally realized his true strength, and knew that it was time for him to show himself. He too was looking forward to meeting with Ordo to finally resolve their long-standing grievance. Meanwhile, the young man awakened the power of the dragon within himself, and a strange symbol appeared on his wrist. Ordo realized that the dragon god had made Jin Hyuk his apostle and bestowed his power upon him. So he ordered Tiamat to kill him immediately. For if they do not manage to kill the young man before the dragon god arrives, everything will end in disaster for them. As the dragon attempted to attack Jin Hyuk with flames, time suddenly stopped again, and the young man heard a strange voice. Jin Hyuk asked Ordo why he did this, Did he really want to tell him something again? However, Ordo stated that he did not understand what he was talking about because this time he did not stop time. Moreover, at that very moment, Ordo felt a strange energy belonging to the dragon god, whose appearance he feared most of all. The dragon god asked Ordo how he dared to kidnap a dragon that was his own child. He was furious that Ordo had turned his dragon into a weapon of mass destruction for their own purposes. Moreover, Ordo wanted to kill Jin Hyuk, the apostle of the dragon god, just because he didn't like him. However, Ordo denied any guilt, saying that he did everything only for the sake of peace in his world, claiming that these deaths were only a small sacrifice. Hearing this, Jin Hyuk immediately rushed at Ordo to teach him a lesson for everything he had done. In response, Ordo wanted to stop time for Jin Hyuk, but after trying, he realized that he had lost this ability. The dragon god said that this was not surprising, since Jin Hyuk was his proxy, possessing the power of a dragon. That is, equivalent to divine power. Ordo couldn't believe that a common man was trying to defeat him and considered it a humiliation. However, now the young man was no longer an ordinary man. His strength had surpassed mortal limits. Jin Hyuk also stated that people do not need a god who seeks to destroy their world, and told him to disappear. After that, he dealt Ordo a fatal blow and was sure that he was finished. But at that moment, something strange happened. Jin Hyuk found himself in a strange place, with Ordo next to him, who said he wanted to talk a little and change the dimension for this. He admitted that the young man had exceeded all his expectations, and he did not believe that anyone would appear who could resist God. Ordo admitted defeat and said that after the blow his mind cleared, and he realized that being a god does not mean knowing everything. So he decided to give up everything he wanted and had, handing over all his power to a young man so that he could rule the world. Jin Hyuk was confused and didn't understand what just happened. When the young man returned to the world, he felt that the space had changed. And then the dragon god explained that Ordo had transferred his powers to him. He noted that Ordo had given up everything, had regained his faith in people, and had even entrusted him with Tiamat to look after the new world. From now on, the young man's duty is to bring peace to the world, and his actions will be watched over by the dragon god himself. After that, the dragon god disappeared, and Jin Hyuk still couldn't believe that he had become a god. Meanwhile, Lucia came to her senses thanks to the dragon god, who healed her body. Jin Hyuk was glad that Lucia was okay and suggested that she return home. However, Lucia said that she would not go with him, because she believed that the world they were in now was her home. The young man was both happy and sad. Happy that Lucia had finally found a home, and sad because now their paths would diverge. Lucia herself said that they would meet again in the future, but now they were forced to say goodbye, and also asked to convey her greetings to the dwarf, and on this they parted ways. After this, Jin Hyuk left Lucia's world, but he could never have imagined that something like this would happen in his life. A portal to a dungeon would appear in the room, which would turn his life upside down. The young man never thought that he would ever be able to reach such a level, and still does not understand what Ordo was thinking when he handed over to him the powers of the ruler of the world. However, what Jin Hyuk knew for sure was that he must now guide humanity on the right path, and he would do everything to build a new world where peace would reign.